Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first annual PMP Painting Competition Award Show. So, very excited. It's been a long road, and here we are. We are finally ready to announce who the winners are. We're going to talk about all the various categories. We're going to review everything. If you don't know what I mean by the PMP, that is the Painters Motivating Painters. That's our Google Plus hobby community where we get together, share our progress, and offer constructive and positive criticism / opportunities / help to make sure that everybody can take the next step on their own personal hobby journey. And of course, just recently, we concluded the first annual True Painting Competition. Now, we do lots of hobby challenges throughout the year, but this is the first time we're actually doing a true competition. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the competition quickly, just to remind everybody and level set. I'm going to talk about how this show is going to go. So first off, it'll just be me doing all of this. We don't have Mickey. She judged as well. She's in the comments. So if you want to yell at her for not appearing on camera, you're more than welcome to do that. Be nice. But, you know, I did offer, just so we're clear. But there you go. And so what we're going to cover today is we'll look at all the results of the competition. We're going to look at how everybody placed. This was an open competition. So that is to say your work doesn't necessarily get judged against anybody else's, but against a standard rubric, and you are given a value. To give a sort of brief overview about how Mickey and I approach this, you have a scale of 1 to 10 in the various sort of elements that we talked about. So, for example, painting and creativity, difficulty, etc. And you're given a score of 1 to 10 in each of those places, in each of those categories, by each of us independently. Those are then applied to the percentages for the various categories. So for in this competition, you submitted one piece, and that one piece that you completed had an opportunity to compete in Best Painted, Best Creation, Best Narrative, and People's Choice. Okay. And for the first three, the competition is weighted differently. So for example, you may have very high marks in painting, but you might have done a very simple piece. So hence you would have a low difficulty score. Well, in that case, in the Best Painted, there's a high weight on painting quality. So hence you're going to do very well there. But on Best Creation, there's a much higher weight on difficulty. So your score would be lower, reflecting that. Okay. All right. So that's sort of the basics of how this is going to go. Mickey and I got together, we evaluated it independently, then put the scores together and averaged them to get everybody's final place. The way this works is there are 4 different sort of categories you can end up in, or nothing. Obviously, you could end up in nothing, but there are 4 different categories you can end up in, which is honorable mention, bronze, silver, and gold. And then each category will have a first place. I have all of the first place trophies sitting on my desk right here out of camera. They're right here. I can see them. You can't. Haha. And so the way we're going to do this today is we are going to start with, I'm going to sort of share my screen. We're going to be doing a bouncing back and forth between a lot of different things as we review it all. I'm going to start out going category by category and go through the various award levels, wherein I'll have everybody's name and the piece that they did listed, so you can see where you fell in each category. Okay. I'm going to put up a final result sheet in the PMP later today. And once we've gone through that entire thing, we're going to stop, and then we'll do the actual first places. That'll have some, some fanfare and things like that around it. And then after that, we're going to go, we'll kind of pause there for a moment once we have all the first places announced. And then we're going to go into the deep dive. So basically, I didn't want to make the award announcements wait till after the deep dive. I wanted to sort of announce all the awards, but a critical part of the PMP philosophy is that feedback matters. And that was a big element of this competition to me. To me, the reason to compete is to get feedback. And so Mickey and I both prepared, as I said, fully written out feedback. I'm going to go at a high level and review it in the video for everybody today as we go through the pieces. But everybody will get a PDF of their feedback as well as their scores. I'm going to try to send it using everybody's Google Plus to your email. So hopefully that routes properly. If for any reason you don't get it, my email will be down below and you can always reach out to me. But everybody will get a dedicated PDF of their all feedback from Mickey and myself, as well as your final scores and placements. Okay. So all that's going to go out later today. All right. So everything makes sense as far as this goes. Hopefully so. You can't respond back to me, obviously. Well, yeah, I'm watching the comments, by the way. I will openly admit I'm not going to be able to watch the comments too carefully because I'm focused on what's going on the screen here, but I'll try to pay attention occasionally and answer if there are any specific questions. Okay, so let's get into it. We're going to start out with the presentation. We're going to go through each category and, like I said, each sort of level placement. So let's start there. All righty. We're going to lock on myself, which is kind of pointless in this case. And we're going to screen share that screen, and then we're going to bring this up and go into slideshow mode. So hopefully that is coming through okay. Somebody in the comments give me a this looks okay, and you can see the slideshow. I want to make sure that's coming through all right. Okay. Hopefully it is. Yes, I'm looking right now at it. I caught back up I'm trying not to actually run in live mode the thing because I don't want it to slow down. So okay, there we go. We're good. So let's take a look. Here we go. Time to get some results, folks. Is everybody ready? I have no music cues or drum rolls I can do in this, but hopefully there we go. All right. So let's start out with the painting competition categories. I already kind of went through this. I just wanted to have the rules up here on the screen for everybody. All submissions, people did one submission each. It was entered into all 4 categories automatically. This is how the categories were weighted. This will repeat on all of the pages. Okay. All right. Nothing too shocking here. So let's begin with the Best Painted Awards. As you can see, Best Painted was weighted very heavily toward painting. I mean, it's pretty obvious, I suppose. And so let's take a look. We're going to start with our honorable mentions. So honorable mention, we had Rob Norton with his Plague Lord, the Swooz with the Orc Ganger, Zab Asylum with the Slaughter Priest, and Zac Vineyard with the Skull Crusher. I would like to point out that I was pleased because there wasn't anybody who didn't at least get into the honorable mention. And by the way, that wasn't by design. It would have been actually quite easy for someone to not even get into this category had they not done good work. So what's important here is that Mickey and I use a bell curve evaluation system. We look at these and evaluate them. It sort of forces toward the middle, but there are very easy deductions that could take you down out of this, and no one did. Everybody who sent in pieces put forth a great amount of effort. And I was very happy to see that. So congratulations to our Best Painted honorable mentions. And let's move on to bronze. All right. So next up, we've got the bronze winners in Best Painted. So quite a lot here. So we've got Daka Des with his Pox Collar, Burning Beard with his Wizard that he submitted, Jens BK with the Lord Celestant, Southpaw Studios with his Pedra Cantor Space Marine, Eran Roseman's Dragon, Fred Mulvaney's Dreadnought, Vindicatus with the Killer Cans, Kieran with the Onager Dune Crawler, Femto Crawl with the Orc Brute, Eli with the Hell Brute, a lot of brutes, Jack Williams' Gutrot Spume, Jarrod Brantley's Company Master, Jarax's Troll Priest, Dakota Weaver's Auric Megaboss, the Miniatures Paintbrush, his big Mortis Engine, Tom Philbrick and his Chibi Demon Lord, which I thought was a very cute model, Matthew Price with Neferata, Bjarni Steinar with his Canoness, Ryan Easterling with his Kingdom Death Monster, Rethonn Studios with his Slenderman diorama, Xabier Talon with his Troll, and Caleb Goodson with his Ogre Maneater. Okay. Hopefully everybody can still hear me okay. Dice Miniature Pink, I said he couldn't hear anything, but you know, if somebody can't hear me, please tell me right now. But you should be hearing me talk. Yes, Mickey just shared the scoring out of there. And the reason you look at that and think, well, gold was 7+, keep in mind that because we use a forced bell curve, it is very hard. Like 10s are a near impossibility. It would take like somebody like Kirill Kanayev to get a 10. Okay. And 9s represent near flawless work. So that's the way that we evaluated it. Okay. Let's move on to silver. There's a lot of really good stuff in here, by the way. Everybody did a wonderful job. Let's talk about silver. All right, silver. We had Jeremy Merle with his Princess. And by the way, if I butcher names throughout this, I'm very sorry. I'm terrible at names, so please forgive me. Greg Charlebois with the Dark Angel Chaplain. Andrew Fairbanks with Durthu. Dan Groth with the, oh man, Raicho Pilot. Let's go with that. Dice Miniature Paint Guy with the Dark Souls Dancer, which, by the way, Dice Miniature Paint Guy, I want to see some more of those Dark Souls minis get entered in here. I know you're working on them. I saw them on you know, vids and Twitter and stuff. Deathabilly Pete with his giant unicycle conversion. E. Dave with the Ranger Rabbit, which, if I could make a special mention, might have won the award for cutest submission. Zachary Britt for Belisarius Crawl. William Matthews for Arabelle the Undefeated, super classic chaos model there. Radek Wypadek with the Space Marine Terminator. Andrew Sedlin with the Eldar Jet Bike. Tomasz Jurczak with the Holy Paladin. Omri Arbiv with the KO Frigate. Johannes with his Krell submission. Lee Ascroft with the Beastmaster on Griffin. Bethany Graham with the Pumpkin King. Spartan D with his Tomb Chariot. Obviously, all Tomb Kings things have a special place in my heart, but obviously that did not influence our judging at all. I was actually happy to see after I judged blind of what Mickey had judged, and I was happy on things like that, that when I looked at my numbers, they were this very, very close to what Mickey had judged, which made me happy. It told me I was hopefully not being biased. Chris Smith with Glotkin, David Robertson with the Ogre Brawler, Idiot Proof Dalek with the War Chanter, Victor Case's Changeling, Paul Marcroft's Victoria, Nick Curtin's Morghast, and Flab Luker's Ice Ogre. Okay, so these are our silver award winners. Congratulations to everybody in the best painted category who got a silver. Now we come to the gold, and you know, getting a gold was tough in this. As I have mentioned many times now, the way that the scoring was set up, you had to submit something really, really good to get to the gold. Like it had to be pretty flawless. So let's take a look. All right, in our gold for best painted, we have Peel Tag for the Auric Warboss, the Muffin Bagger with his Demon Lord, Bart K's Blood Secrator, Forge of Wonders, our buddy Kieran from the monthly reviews with Jessica Thunderhawk, which is going to be a wedding cake topper this next weekend in a wedding. How about that? SkeletonFlower for his Vampire Lady, and Casual 1414 with his KO Frigate. So these were all the standouts when you wait for painting. All of these represent great work. We're going to look at all of these individually, like I said, after we give out the first place awards when we do the deep dive. So there you go. Congratulations to everybody here who took home gold. It is well earned. Okay, that's what I want to point out. Like, the wonderful thing I love about open painting competitions, the way that this is you're not competing against others. You keep what you kill, as it were. It is meritocracy, and all these people earned it. Everybody earned all of their placements here, and everybody did a wonderful job. Okay, so let's move on to a slightly different take on it in the Best Narrative Awards. So narrative is when your piece tells a story. These were for people who were doing more narratively driven pieces, things that were seeking to communicate some kind of story through the art alone. Narrative is always challenging because, you know, you don't have words. It's not a book. You have to speak just through pictures. But of course, good art moves us perhaps just as much or more than any story could. So let's take a look at our honorable mentions. Okay, so here we've got Rob Norton with the Plague Lord, the Swooz with the Orc Ganger, and Zac Vineyard with the Skull Crusher. Again, all very good work and very good job, guys. And we look forward to more. Okay, let's move on to our silvers. Or sorry, bronzes. Bronze. By the way, I'm reading all these names. I hope that's not too annoying. I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm not sure. This is our first annual show, so I want feedback on this, by the way. So please, in the comments or whatever, leave me feedback on how we can improve this for next year, because I'm going to do this once a year. All right, so in our bronze, we had Jeremy Merle's Princess, Docadez's Poxcaller, Burning Beard's Wizard, Andrew Fairbanks' Durthu, Southpaw Studios, Pedro Cantor, Dan Groth's Racho Pilot, Fred Mulvaney's Dreadnought, Vindicatus's Killer Cans, Kieran's Onager Dunecrawler, Femto Crawl's Orc Brute, Tomas's Holy Paladin, Eli's Hellbrute, Zab's Slaughter Priest, Jack Williams' Gutrot Spume, Jared's Company Master, Jarax's Trolls, Dakota Weaver's Auroch Megaboss, the Miniatures Paintbrush Mortis Engine, Tom Philbrick's Chibi Demon Lord, Matthew Price's Neferata, Bjarni's Canoness, and Ryan Easterling's Kingdom Death Monster, Xabier Talon's Troll, and Caleb Goodson's Ogre Maneater. Okay. All right. Very, very good job, everybody. Now let's look at some silvers. Okay, and we had a lot of silvers in this category because a lot of people managed to tell some great stories through this. Just through the way that they painted it, lit it, did the basing, had the various elements of the piece come together. So in silver, we have Peel Tag with the Auric Warboss, Greg Charlebois' Dark Angel Chaplain, Jens BK's Lord Celestant, Dice Miniature Paint Guy's Dark Souls Dancer, Deathabilly Pete's Giant Unicycle, E. Dave's Ranger Rabbit, Eran Roseman's Dragon, Zachary Britt's Belisarius Crawl, William Matthews' Arabelle the Undefeated, Redek's Space Marine Terminator, Andrew Selden's Eldar Jetbike, Forge of Wonders' Jessica Thunderhawk, Omri's KO Frigate, Johannes' Krell, Lee Ascroft's Beastmaster on Griffin, Spartan D's Tomb Chariot, Chris Smith's Glotkin, David Robertson's Ogre Brawler, Idiot Proof Dalek's War Chanter, Victor Case's Changeling, Casual's Frigate, Paul Marcroft's Victoria, Rethonn Studios' Slenderman, Nick Curtin's Morghast, and Flab Luker's Ice Ogre. Okay. So, okay, good. Somebody said they... Tomasz said, hearing me butcher his name is hilarious. Please continue. Thank you, Tomasz, for having a good, for being kind about that, because I am very sorry for butchering everybody's name. So, yes, really, really excellent work, everybody, in the silver. Now, let's, and what you'll notice is some of the people who were in different places in the best painted, there's differences in the placement here. One of the things I was most happy about with how we did this was that the weighting worked. There were people who achieved different levels in the different categories as would be appropriate. By that, what I mean is they were very creative or did something extremely difficult, and they might not have nailed it on the painting, but it shows here. So even if they got maybe a bronze in the painting, they came up to a silver or even a gold in the creativity or in the narrative or something like that. So, all right. Sorry, I'm just laughing at Vinky. So, best narrative gold. All right, we have The Muffin Bagger with Demon Lord, Bart K's Bloodsecrator, SkeletonFlower's Vampire Lady, and Bethany Graham's Pumpkin King. I know Bethany Graham doesn't like the comparison with Jack Skellington and doesn't like The Nightmare Before Christmas, but I'm sorry, that song's in my head every time I look at your piece, and it's a wonderful piece. Everybody here, these are fantastic entries, and every one of them told a clear and present narrative. I could read it so strong. It jumped off of the piece, and I loved that. So they were all painted well, incredibly creative, wonderful presentations. They were great. So very, very, very good job. All right. So last up, best creations. Begin with the honorable mentions. So we've got Rob Norton with his Plague Lord, Zac Vineyard's Skull Crusher, and Jarax's Troll Priest. So obviously this one was weighted the most by creativity. So those people who did a lot of conversions or move stuff around really pushed themselves in the making of the model. That's where you excelled in this category. It was heavily weighted in that way. So let's go to bronzes. And we have a lot. Okay, so Jeremy Merle's Princess, Dakadez's Pox Collar, Greg Charlebois' Dark Angel Chaplain, Burning Beard's Wizard, Jen's BK's Lord Celestant, Andrew Fairbanks' Durthu, Dan Groth's Racho Pilot, Eran Roseman's Dragon, Fred Mulvaney's Dreadnought, Vindicatus's Killer Cans, Kieran's Onager Dunecrawler, Femto Crawl's Orc Brute, Tomas's Holy Paladin, the Swooz's Orc Ganger, Eli's Hellbrute, Zab Asylum's Slaughter Priest, Jack Williams' Gutrot Spume, Spartan D's Tomb Chariot, Jarrod Brantley's Company Master, Dakota Weaver's Auric Megaboss, the Miniatures Paintbrush Mortis Engine, Tom Philbrick, Chibi Demon Lord, Matthew Price's Neferata, Bjarni Steiner's Canoness, Victor Case's Changeling, Ryan Easterling's Kingdom Death Monster, Nick Curtin's Morghast, Xabier Talon's Troll, Caleb Goodson's Ogre Maneater, and Flab Luker's Ice Ogre. Okay. And then let's go to the silver. So in silver, we had Peel Tags, Auric Warboss, the Muffin Beggars, Demon Lord, Southpaw Studios, Pedro Cantor, Space Marine, Dice Miniature Paint Guys, Dark Souls Dancer, E-Dave's Ranger Rabbit, Zachary Britt's Belisarius Krull, William Matthews Arabelle, the Undefeated, Radek Space Marine Terminator, Andrew Sedlin's Eldar Jetbike, Bart K's Bloodsecrator, Forge of Wonders Jessica Thunderhawk, Omri Arbiv's KO Frigate, Johannes's Krell, Lee Ascroft's Beastmaster on Griffin, Chris Smith's Glotkin, David Robertson's Ogre Brawler, Idiot-Proof Dalek's War Chanter, Casual 1414's Frigate, and Paul Marcroft's Victoria. So let's move on to the last one before we get to the announcement of the winners of the first places, which is our gold in Best Creation. So in gold, we had Deathabilly Pete's Giant Unicycle, SkeletonFlower's Vampire Lady, Bethany Graham's Pumpkin King, and Rethonn Studios' Slender Man. Really, really wonderful creations here. Each one of these had an unbelievable amount of creativity put into them and exemplified this category. They told a story. They took a lot of work. They had a lot of things like sculpting and stuff like that, or placement of things in very clever and unusual ways. They were inspiring in every single way possible. Very, very well done to these four individuals who golded the Best Creation Awards. Okay, so now I have to figure out how to end this without revealing anything. And I think that's going to be, I scan back up to the top here real quick so you can't accidentally see something while I stop sharing my screen. Okay. All right. So well done to everybody. The goal of this being the first one, and the point of open competitions is you're really only competing against yourself. So the hope is that you take the feedback, you look at what you did, and when we do this again next year, you try to beat what you did next year. You try to improve upon those things month to month, or year over year. Okay. So now we're going to, so here we go. I'm going to announce these here on this screen and hold up the awards, and then we'll go look at the pieces together. Because otherwise flipping back and forth between the presentation, it's going to spoil it. And I don't want to do that. Okay. So here we go. Let's start with the Best Painted Award. So out of all of these, we then took the highest score in each category, right? In the Best Painted, Best Creation, Best Narrative. And then, of course, the People's Choice. That was done by all of you who voted and decided who your champion was. And the highest score took first place. There's no more esoteric sorcery to it. If you got the highest total score, you took first place. That's what it boiled down to. So here we go. Let's get into it. Let's begin with the award for Best Painted. So the first place award for Best Painted in the first annual PMP painting competition goes to somebody who I think very much deserved it and did a wonderful, amazing job with a truly great piece in all respects. But I'm especially happy to give this to them. And that is presented to, I don't know if you can read it or not, but that is presented to SkeletonFlower for the Vampire Lady. So Skeleton, you are the first place for Best Painted for the 2017 PMP painting competition. Well done, sir. Well earned. Well done. So there you go. Congratulations, sir. This will be coming your way. For all of our first place people, I have to get your address so I can actually send you the award because you have a physical award I need to send you. I would love to have done little awards for everybody, but I would go bankrupt on the shipping. So I'm very sorry. You'll have to settle for the PDF. Congratulations, Skeleton. I hope there's a round of applause around the world right now for his awesome work. Okay. So next up, we have the Best Narrative. And this was a tight one. There were several really good pieces with the narrative, but in the end, there was one clear winner. And having seen what this person has sort of shared this week, has been going on in their life, I was very happy to know that this was the case already. And so to our first place winner for Best Narrative, that goes to Bethany Graham for The Pumpkin King. Bethany, way to go. Incredible piece. Wonderful story. So many little nuances throughout that wonderful diorama. This was definitely very well earned for a ton of effort. So Bethany, congratulations. Well done. Best Narrative. And I think Bethany is down in the Southern Hemisphere. So we're going to ship that. I can't promise that's going to get there real quick. That probably goes on a boat or something, but it's coming to you. Okay. Next up, we had Best Creation. And this was a very interesting one because we did have one creation that I thought the imagination behind and the ability to make it work was truly unique. So our winner for Best Creation, the one-of-a-kind submission by Deathabilly Pete for the giant unicycle. Just a truly unbelievable creation. It truly, if there was a Frankenstein's monster, but in a good way, it was this. So way to go, Deathabilly. Very well done. Okay. So there we go. Great job, Deathabilly Pete. Very, very big congratulations. Finally, the People's Choice. This one, Mickey and I had nothing to do with. This was all voting by all of you. So thank you to everybody who voted. And that is deeply, deeply appreciated. We had, a lot of people vote, well more than entered the competition. So I was happy to see that. That means the members of the PMP were evaluating and voting, as we would hope. And so the first place award for People's Choice, and, it makes total sense. This is a great piece. You saw it come up a couple times in the gold, and that goes to Bart K for his Blood Secretor. Absolutely wonderful piece, wonderful image and ambiance of the piece. Such striking colors of the Blood Secretor over the fiery lava, the blue Stormcast shield, bright, beautiful, clear, concise colors. So congratulations, Bart K, on being the People's Choice for the first annual painting competition 2017. So there we go, folks. There are your first place awards for the first annual PMP painting competition. Obviously, a congratulations to all the winners, but to everybody who submitted, it's deeply, deeply appreciated. And I hope that everybody is happy with where they came down. Like I said, everybody will get their feedback. One of the interesting elements is, and obviously we're all learning through this as well, but one of the interesting elements is, of course, although things were weighted, other things still mattered. So, you know, in creation, painting still mattered. It didn't matter. All that wasn't the whole shooting match, but, you know, the creativity of the piece was weighted the most heavily. But, you know, painting could hurt you and stuff like that. So we're going to see going forward how we feel about the weights. Are they correct? Mickey and I will talk a lot about that. We welcome all of your feedback. The goal of this is to improve. And obviously this is, you know, running an online paint competition is a little bit different than being in person. And because of the nature of how we have to score it, you know, using photos, and we can't actually pick up and hold the piece and stuff like that, there's always room for error. But we hope everybody appreciates everything that was done. I know I appreciate very much Mickey's help. The big, giant, immense, unbelievable thank you to Mickey for all of her hard work. She couldn't have been more on the ball, more responsible with this. And hopefully I can trick her into judging again next year. All right. So with that out of the way and the first place awards announced, it's time to go into the deep dive. So if you saw what you're interested in and you want to be like, well, thank you very much, have a great day, I don't take any offense. But what we are going to do now is we are going to jump over to the PMP. We're going to scroll back to the beginning and of the submissions. And we're going to go in order, and I'm going to talk about the feedback on them. I will say I will not see any comments during this period of the video because I have to have both screens up looking at them. Like I have to have the feedback screen on one and the PMP on the other. So if you're talking in the comments, I won't see you. I apologize for this part. Wonderful, wonderful work from everybody. Let's get into the deep dive. Okay. All right. So okay. Sorry, just taking a moment here. Okay, let me share up my screen. And we'll get to the PMP. All right. And hopefully that's coming through okay. Now we'll get a look at all these pieces we've been talking about. Keep loading. You can do it. There we go. All right. Okay, let me just make sure that's still coming through okay. Whoa, whoa, whoa. All right. Yep, looks like that's coming through okay. All right. So let's get into it then. Let's talk feedback. Okay. So let's start with Caleb, because Caleb, I think I saw in the comments that Caleb was curious about this and the feedback from it. So Caleb has the converted Maneater, Sylvaneth Maneater here, which is a wonderful idea. Overall, this is a very creative Maneater, perfectly in line with, you know, sort of the tradition of the Maneaters, being that they always borrowed sort of technology and training and skills, and maybe forcefully, maybe not, from the other races of the world. I think your real opportunities here, Caleb, and what, you know, sort of what kept you from going up higher in some of the categories was the painting, right? Unfortunately, with the colors, we have a lot of very flat tones. And what I mean is when we look at these leaves and stuff around here, like this was a great opportunity to work more color in, to push some color out. Like every one of these leaves should be picked out. If you want to go all the way, everyone should have veins painted into it, right? Like I'll give you the full feedback for how you could take this all the way up. When we look at the wood, we want much more heavier contrast on that wood. You know, this is assumingly dead wood. He's wearing a tree man's face. I don't think that's his head. So there should be deep shadows, dead wood, gray edges, dark recessed black shadows, things like that, right? Because these tree man faces are really, really heavily pitted. When we look at things like the skin, we'd want to see our, you know, deep crimsons and purples, or in honesty, you want to make a nice trade. Work some dark green tones into the skin. Okay. Like here we can see this is hidden under his mask or down here under his arm. These need to be very heavy in shadow. We need to work on, you know, that kind of highlighting, pushing those edges around. When it comes to the pants, same story, right? I'd want to see deeper greens pushing into brown tones to shadow that out. Same with the boots. Contrast is the name of the game here. It's the same with the cloak on the back. The cloak on the back let me down the most, to be completely honest. I've painted a lot of these Treeman tabards. I've done 6 Treemen in my time, and almost every one of them I used this tabard for. And this thing is a joy. This gives you so much opportunity to work with highlighted edges, contrast, things like that. Right? Now, the creativity behind this is good. And when you get your scores, you'll see that you scored pretty high creatively, which is, well-deserved. This is a very creative piece. But unfortunately, when we looked at the rest of it, especially when we look at like the base, which is, part of the presentation of the model, and the painting, those 2 elements serve to kind of anchor you back down. Okay. But overall, very good work. I love the idea. It's inspired, it's creative, and I think your goal that you should set for yourself for the next year should be to really push on your painting and spend time on it. One thing I'll say is, you submitted this very early. You had another month and a half. Don't just be done, is my answer for almost everybody here who wasn't painting up until the deadline. When you get a piece done for competition, set it to the side, especially if you finish early, and come back 2 weeks later and say, what can I do with this more? Put another 2 hours into it and set it to the side, and come back a week later and say, what can I do with this? And put another hour into it. And those little touches are how you elevate a competition model up. Okay. All right. Okay. Next up, I'm going to have to scroll a lot here. I apologize at the beginning. There's just no other way to do this because that's how Google Plus works. All right. Flab Luker's Ice Ogre. We're starting with ogres. There's an ogre-heavy beginning to this. Okay. So the this is a very interesting ogre, obviously very unique color choices. And there's a lot of little cool things I like about this. Good contrast on the skin. The rust work on the plates, on the metal plates, looks really nice. The blood drip into the snow, I thought was well done. Overall, this is a solid piece. I think where we have opportunities for, sort of improvement are in a couple different places. The first thing I would say is the white is very flat of the hair. I know we wanted it to be snowy white. I still would have loved to see a little bit of gray transition in there. Some of those muscles could use a little different highlighting. What I mean by that is if we look at the shoulder here, this is just as highlighted as this one is. And this band is less exposed to the light. We also want to be careful. These ogres don't always snap up all the way completely tightly. We want to make sure we don't have these big crevices still exposed of the model itself. Finally, and I think my area of, biggest challenge on this is the sword. The sword, it's a neat airbrush effect, but that's just it. It's a neat airbrush effect. I need more in here. If this is supposed to be ice, I need cracks. I need more tonal variation. I need something. This did well on painting. Okay. And this piece performed quite well. Where I think you've got some opportunities are to keep pushing your elements of the piece. You have some elements that are really high contrast and really detailed. Like, let's look at this fist right here, right? Like, look at this thing. Look at how wonderfully scratched and worn and weathered and detailed that is. And then we look over here at this sword and we're like, oh, it's dark blue to light blue. What's going on here, right? They don't look consistent in the same piece, and that's going to always cause you problems. Okay. Overall, good stuff. I really liked this ogre a lot. I love the blue skin. I love blue skins. I thought it's executed well here. You kept just enough real flesh tone in the highlights to make it still read as skin. So well done. Okay. This is going to be the best part of the show right here is all this scrolling. I know it. Okay. Next up. Who's our actual next one? Rethonn. Okay. So Rethonn Studios, who had a very broad division in the scoring. And the reason for that is I think Rethonn had one of the most heavy weightings of a difference between sort of painting and creativity and presentation. And the reason for that being that this piece is beyond imagination and creativity with this weird Slender Man and his unusual colors and these hospital walls and tiles and the pictures on the wall. Like, can we just take a moment to zoom in here and look at these? That's pretty awesome. I really love all these little things. This is such great detail. The tiles, they feel so like old and sort of like 1960s creepy hospital. It's pretty great. My issue is this. Painting wise, we had a long way to go here. I'll break this into two things, the model and the background. The model itself is rather flat. And what I mean by that is when I look at these tentacles coming out of his back or whatever they are, whatever Slenderman has hidden behind him, they look very flat. It's basically the same purple kind of all throughout. Same with his, head, except for the texture. Same with his, whatever this thing is called, this little neck piece he has, and his coat and his pantaloons. The problem is we don't have any contrast here. And this would have been an excellent chance, since you're doing a horror piece, to really cast this all in heavy shadows. Go super contrast, where almost all of him is cast in desaturated, extremely dark colors, and only little bits of him show in the light. Okay? You didn't have to go that direction. I'm just saying that could have been one way to take it. But more contrast in general would have been good. And that really dinged you. The other half of this I'll say is the walls. This, to me, feels like it's set in an old mental institution or hospital or something like that from the 60s. If that is the case, this place is beyond clean. This has the best caretaker in the universe. We have old pieces of paper stuck to the wall, but we don't have any cracks in the wall, no water stains. I've been in old buildings with this kind of stucco. They get stained instantly because water leaks through, especially in an old building that's not being properly cared for. Tiles get cracked, fall off, hit the ground, right? There should be old abandoned tiles down here, cracked tiles, scratches on them. By the way, creepy scratches or like blood handprints or stuff like that could have been another way to up the ambiance here, right? If it looks like there's a set of claws right here running off, quote unquote, camera, running out of the world, that really sells the illusion. So when you're making a piece that's trying to convey a particular emotion, like horror, you want to make sure that the entire piece feeds that emotion equally. You don't want something to be super clean, whereas the rest, if that's what you're trying to sort of commit to. Okay. Overall, though, like I said, as far as the narrative and the presentation of the piece, then you're doing the right thing here. That is great. That is wonderful and imaginative and awesome. Okay. All righty. We're going to be here a while, by the way, folks. So, tuck in. I hope you get something to paint. Okay. Let's see. Next up, because we've got like 57 of these to go to, and we've done 3. All right. Nick Curtin. Nick. So Nick has this wonderfully contrasting piece. It's so bright and wonderful in its complementary color scheme. Orange and blue are great. We're going to see it a couple times in the competition. And this model really is a great take on it. This did, well on painting. And your overall presentation is good. There were a few places, though, where I think you fell down and you've got some opportunities. The first thing I would say is that some of these blends are not as smooth as they should be. Some of these lines are not as sharp as they should be. Like when we look in here, and I can see this yellow being very stark against this red. And here, these transitions in here, up in here in the fire. There's lots of little places where we can see the exact color line, the brush stroke that separated the two things. It's the same with the gray, right? Where I can see it being too strong. There's places where the red got on the gray here and we didn't go back and clean it up. Things like that are problematic. On a larger composition level, the face is very flat and just falls back into the piece. The face was a great opportunity to do some glowing blue eyes in the same energy as your gems, and that would have popped the face right back out. People look at eyes and faces on models. It is the center point. It's where your eyes begin their journey around the model. So you always want to make sure that it's eye grabbing enough to draw them back, because ostensibly what you want to do is have them move around the piece and then end at the same place. Nice circular movement around your model. Finally, on the base, I get the blue OSL that we're going for here, but we don't have enough deep shadows and or crossover. Also, the texture is a bit strange. If this is supposed to be lava, obsidian, glass, it feels a little too sandy. And there's not enough dark black in here where there'd be heavy shadows. Like right here, there's no lava directly glowing in this area, and it's got blue coming from here and yellow coming from here and here. This should be a very deep shadow. This should be a very deep shadow, like darn near black. Okay? Stuff like that. Overall, very well done. Very cool piece. I mean, I think he's an awesome Morghast that's going to blow people's minds when you put him on the table. I'll say that for sure. Okay. All right. Next up. Oh, where's the... Sorry, my evaluation sheet's in a strange order here. Okay. Xabier Talon's troll, Mr. Stone Troll. Okay. So Mr. Stone Troll here is a very nice troll. He's a classic troll. We love them. The name of the game here is contrast and where we're lacking it. So we've got some nice highlights. I want to give Xabier a thumbs up for doing some pretty great highlight work and really catching some high points on the muscles and on the belly and the nose and the ridges of the eyes and stuff like that. Unfortunately, that's where we stopped doing it. Our bone has no more highlight here than it does here. And I don't know why that would be. The gold especially is very, very, very flat. This is one of the big challenges I saw over and over again throughout the competition was flat metals. If you're going to use true metallic metal, especially in competition, you gotta take it up. You got to apply those techniques from NMM to create some contrast, some shadows, control the light. Basically, you need to take back control of the light. The other place that was missing in contrast, we have some great highlights, but we're really missing our low lights. I don't see the deep purples that blue skin should normally have. Like this guy still has some kind of blood in him. He's a living thing. So I would expect him, I don't know that his blood's red. It could be anything. But the point is that there's some other color of blood underneath his skin that should be causing it to, in the deeper areas, to have tonal variation. So specifically, you know, here around his eye is about the same color of blue as the front of his forearm. Around my eyeball is not the same color of skin as on my forearm. I'll tell you that right now. Especially me, since I never sleep, but for this guy as well. I also don't have giant troll eye ridges that would cast this in deep, deep shadow. In between the little plates here of his little stone hide, you know, these kinds of things. We need to really push that hard contrast on these deep, deep crevices the model has. Okay. Same with the bone, same with the gold. The eyes are also kind of a letdown in that you had a big model here with some opportunity to do some really interesting eyes. And we just kind of went for some flat yellow and a black dot. I feel like we could have done more there. We could do some interesting eyes out of this troll because he's actually got enough surface area to work with. I don't know what troll eyes look like, but I would have loved to see a more imaginative take on it. I'm sure if we looked at some art, we could, you know, find something. So I think that's where we have a big opportunity there as well. Overall, great stone troll. He looks very cool. And I liked him. Okay. Ooh. Whoa. Mouse is getting away from me. Okay, next up we have Ryan Easterling and the Kingdom Death monster creature. I don't remember what his name is, but here we go. So once again, like you're going to hear me repeat certain themes, by the way, folks. So, you know, settle in for that. I'm going to try not to say it 100 times. But here we're going to come to the theme of a lot of this. Contrast. Contrast is the name of the game, okay? Miniature painting is a study in light. And this big guy has huge, deep rivets, like huge, deep recesses. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for in his body. like here in his chest, there are these massive ribs that have skin sucked way down in them. This like extremely hard jawline and this jaw tucked underneath. These horns, this nose, these deep recesses in the wings, these knuckles, musculature. All of these things need more attention. What we really needed here is some more highlight. We needed to see things get taken to higher tones and get brought down into deeper shadows to more carve out these muscles. The white is also somewhat letting us down as we went to more or less a pure white, meaning we had nowhere to go, meaning that even in shadow, the pure white is pure white. Pure white is generally a color you want to stay away from on a thing like this. It just leaves you nowhere to run to. And the other thing I would point out is we've got these two seam lines here that aren't filled with these big things. We got to do those basics. You know, to share a story out of my own past, I spent many tens of hours on a big Gorgon, submitted him for competition, and was kept out of basically the top because I missed two seam lines running down his legs. And the judge basically told me directly that your piece was, you know, painted better, but you left these two lines on, and it's a crippling basic mistake you should have caught. And the judge was dead right. So we got to cover the basics like that. Okay. So with the white, I would have rather seen it been a more gray white or something like that. And then that would have left you room to actually push the contrast and the highlight. Again, down here, we'd want to see some deeper shadows pushing into gray or purple or even deep blue or something like that. It's still white. It's just white that. The wings, again, are rather flat and the same color as this guy. They could have been a nice opportunity for some additional color worked in. Compositionally, you could have balanced the bright middle of the monster with some brighter elements out here toward the edges of the wings, which would have created a nice balance because we would have had a circle of bright, a circle of dark, and a center of light. And generally, that's what you want to have. Sort of one of the potential ways you can frame big monsters is with concentric rings. Okay. Also on the basing, you know, we could probably take that up a little bit. I don't hate that you use just the cork. At least you covered it with something, which is good. I still would have rather seen a little more hacks and cuts and nicks out of it, or some more brush, or some more something. Grit, rocks, something else scattered around. You know, looks like a wasteland to me. It's got rocky texture, not Sahara Desert texture. So it should have some different sized rocks or crackles or, you know, something like that. Okay. Okay. So now we come to Casual 1414's Frigate. Casual's Frigate is pretty great. I really like this. The color choices are wonderful. Let's talk about a couple of things he did really well. First of all, we have some nice highlighting around the edge of the blue. It's subtle, but it's there. Good catches the edge highlights there. Our portals look nice. We have a nice subtle transition like we capture glass from dark to light like a gem. We have some wonderful staining from the rivets. It might be a little too heavy, but I'm willing to forgive that because at least we picked out the detail. We've got the rivets running down. We've got each of the rivets dark washed around and then a nice little highlight on them. That looks really nice. Same up here. We've got some good freehand with our runes and stuff. Breaks up this large flat space of the, whatever you call these. These have a name. I don't know, of these things holding up the endrins. You know, one of the problems with this model is this is often a lot of flat blank space, and the addition of the runes and the weathering and stuff like that really helped to break that up. Now, where we've got some opportunity still is in pushing our other colors around, the tonal variation in the golds and the steels. That's where we really, I felt, were lacking. If we look at some of these pieces, we look up here at this steel, you know, we caught the rivets, but that's basically it. You know, everything else is just that silver. There's no variation in it. The gun also suffers from this heavily, as does, you know, these lower areas. Something here should be, we need to grab better control of the light on our metals throughout the piece. You've got this glass being wonderfully reflective in this way, Metal is more reflective, or as reflective at least, depending on it. If it's polished steel, certainly gold, as glass, and yet it's very flat by comparison. Okay. So, you know, overall, I feel like that was our opportunity for improvement. I quite like the subtle blue blending and the edge highlighting on that. I think that looks nice. My only other small note is on the base itself, which is a great piece of this built-up rock. It's a wonderful thing to have it at this angle. Compositionally, I love the fact that it's like banking around this mountain. Thought that was very nice. However, our tufts just feel like tufts stuck on there. Again, I won't repeat this every time. From now on, I'm just going to say the tuft thing. But a lot of commentary that I gave throughout this competition was these tufts just look like tufts. They're clearly just stuck on there with some glue. We need to do more when we're creating our scene. You did a lot of work on the colors and the blending and the different things going on in this mud and dirt and rocks. And I can see it. I can see the reds and the light browns, the deep browns, the blacks, the bones and ivories mixed in there. It's wonderful. And then the tufts themselves just look like green tufts. They have no brown in them, no red, no nothing. Whereas I feel like if we could have dropped some wash down in the base and got it into the ground around it, so it looked like it was, you know, organically part of its scenery, maybe had a little red-white touch on the top to kind of, or, you know, a brown red or something like that, just a quick dry brush across the top, that kind of thing. I feel like we really could have added some extra to that. Finally, my last thing is the purple pool. I don't know what the purple pool is supposed to be. I couldn't find any matching purple on here. I don't know if maybe it fell out of this dwarf's mouth. I wasn't sure what it was or what its purpose was, but compositionally it doesn't work because we don't really have purple in this anywhere. But then we have this bright purple pool right here for like no reason I can ascertain. If I'm missing something casual, please feel free to tell me. But color-wise, it probably should have just been the same green that all the rest of this is. That would have actually been rather nice because it would have tied the pop color on the top to the pop color on the base. Overall, very, very, very nice frigate, though. I did like it quite a bit. Okay, now we come to Paul Marcroft's Victoria, one of my favorite models. I've got a Victoria crew sitting on my shelf right now waiting to be painted. So the Victoria's crew is a great crew, very dynamically posed and placed. Paul did a great job here with lighting. Let's take a moment to really get in on this and appreciate the lighting. Let's really take a look. He's got this wonderful yellow gas lamp, and it's casting its orange-yellow light down on the top of the ridge, on her hair, on the edge of her armor, here and here, right? It's on the edge of the brick, or, you know, whatever this happens to be, tar, whatever this is, on the edge of the fence. Wonderful OSL, as far as that goes. But that's where we also create our problem, our main problem. Now, what I'll say is Paul scored high on painting for achieving this, but here's what kept you off of, like, here's what kept you out of, you know, what I want to say, like being as good as it could have been, I guess. Okay. So we have a soft yellow gas lamp. When do gas lamps come on? We'll all play a game together. Gas lamps come on at night. If they're lit during the day, it's irrelevant, right? That is to say, the sun is brighter than a soft yellow gas lamp. And that's very funny. As I'm talking about a lamp, I swear to the Lord above, my painting light above my desk just burn out. That's hilarious. Anyways, apparently the lights are getting angry at me for talking about them and saying they're not as bright as the sun. Anywho, so, and it's clearly casting its light because we've got this yellow shining down. And yet her skin looks like it is high noon. Her skin is so bright and so brightly painted. There's no shadow. You painted shadows into the armor, and I would have taken them even farther, by the by. Like down here on the underside, there'd be a small amount of reflection coming off of the tar or the whatever this is, the street. But for the most part, this part here should be cast in heavy shadow. But her skin is just bright. It's just this massive, bright, skin tone. It has some nice variation. You worked in some pinks, but the shadows aren't deep enough for even, I would say, a normal zenithal day, let alone a day where the only light source in this world right now is the lamp. Okay. One of the tricks to OSL is not just the light that you create, but the shadows you create. Like most of her face should be cast in heavy shadow. Same with her torso and chest and stuff like that. Like probably the upper part of her chest right here could be lit, but then most of this should be very heavy shadows. Down here, super heavy. Front side of her arm should be basically completely lost in shadow. Okay. And then the other thing where with this that really knocked you was this base. I know what we're going for. I assume like a street, but it's 3 pieces of cork with a fence stuck to it. That's what it is. And I would love to say my imagination could take me somewhere else, but that's what it is. If we are going for street, then we shouldn't have done this build up. If we're going for some raised surface, I need to know, why is this cracked street here? Like narratively, this makes no sense what I'm looking at. Am I looking at a staircase? No, it looks too rough. Am I looking at what is the scene this is happening in? We have 3 extremely disparate elements in the street, the fence, and the lamp, and none of them fit together. So compositionally, the base was the weakest part of this by far. You have such a beautifully painted piece where you just masterfully captured this yellow light, and then you let it down with this base. So overall, this is still a great piece. I do not want you to think for a minute I'm saying anything else. But that's where we have our chief area of opportunity. Okay. Moving on. Okay. Bjarni. All right. Oh, Bjarni. Bjarni chose as his subject not only one of my favorite models of all time, based on one of my favorite pieces of art of all time, but also a piece I recently did for competition. So that's tough. So I don't mean that like I'm going to judge you against myself. That's garbage. I mean, I know the ins and outs of this model and how tough it is. And let me just say, I know the difficulty of this model. This is a deceptively simple model. People think it's just one sister of battle. Oh, she's tough. The detail is not as sharp as it could be because it's resin and all this sort of stuff. All right. So things I like here about this Bjarni that I thought you did really well was, first of all, being very creative with your color scheme. I don't think I've ever seen the candy coat red sister of battle. We're clearly using the sort of Forge World technique here of having a metallic paint within the glossy red candy coat over top, which I thought worked really well. I had no issue with that. Has a sort of 30K Custodes feel to it, which is cool. You kept her hair a little more blonde, which is fine. It balanced better against the warm red, so I had no issue with that. And you really managed to get some good detail in her face, which is not that big. So where we've got some opportunities here is in a couple different places. The first thing I'll say is with this line, this like white line. It almost looks like highlight in the first picture because the reflection point is caught around it. I don't know if you were going for a reflection line or if you were going for a racing stripe. Like that is to say, is this paint on her armor or is this a reflection line? And the problem is that I can't tell that difference. If it's a reflection line, it's not diffuse enough. If it's a racing stripe, it's not sharp enough. It needs to be like thinner and have a very hard edge to it where it's clearly cut out against the armor. It's also a strange thing to put this kind of line, if it is a racing stripe line, like if it's decoration on the armor, over the candy coat. If you had done this all in matte paint and you had this line here, it would look more appropriate. But the problem is we put opaque matte paint in a line over a candy coated metallic. And so it just naturally has an unhealthy clash. Where we also have some opportunities are things like the rivets and stuff like that. So let's take a look at her gun. Let's look at this bolter. We have these 4 bolts And there's a couple other examples of this scattered around the miniature. I'm just picking on it since it's right here in this picture. We have these 4 bolts, and they're just painted the same as everything else. There's no shadow, there's no highlight. Like, this bolt would have something, a little touch of darkness around it, a little touch of highlight on it. Picking out all the bolts on armor, and there's a couple other examples of this around the miniature, are something that can really take it the rest of the way up. I would also point out the same thing on her power sword, where we have the little power nodules that feed the sword are just sort of this color. Maybe they should be, maybe they shouldn't be also red, but then they definitely need some kind of contrast to stand out from the rest of the piece. Okay. The ground itself is fine. There's not a lot going on. It's, dirt. You mixed in well enough the sort of skull thing she's standing on. I'm okay with it. I still would have liked to see a little more cracks or organic colors worked into the concrete. As it is now, it's fairly dark gray and not much else. But the part of this where I think you had the biggest area of opportunity was in the sword. And here's why I say that. Let's go back to this first image here. If you go back and look at the original art from John Blanche, the sword is one of the eye-catching elements of the triangle. So, I mean, John is obviously a master artist, but if you look at it, John creates a triangle with her face and hair, which is bright white, her sword, which is bright white, okay, and her gun, which has this very bright yellow on it, which is the only place this bright yellow exists in the hazard stripes that are on the gun. And he forms a triangle of visual interest to keep you moving around the model, okay? And the problem is here, the gun is more or less the same color as the armor, but flat. And then the sword is the same color as the armor, but flat. And that's what really kills me. Power swords usually are the most dynamic, colorful, vibrant part of the model that they're on. That's why they look like power swords. They're energized, they're bright, they're sort of vibrating or whatever. But this looks like the most boring part of this model. It's this flat color, tinted red. No other variation. This needs something. I needed high contrast in here running from a tip of light to dark and then dark to light or something. I needed this to have the same kind of variation in visual interest the metal armor itself does. And we didn't reach that. Okay. Overall, very cool piece. I think this is a good looking canoness, and I hope she punishes all the heretics that oppose you. Okay. Oop, too far. All right, Matthew Price and Neferata. That's how you have to say that, by the way. You got to roll your R's. Neferata. Okay, so Neferata. Yeah, this I'm going to go back to the contrast thing. We'll just launch right into it. I like this overall. It's a good-looking piece. I'll hit on kind of the top issues. Contrast is the thing here. The dress is rather flat. The black is rather flat. The bone is rather flat. These are the 3 main colors of the piece, and they're not popping as they could be. What we would need to do is have some variation around the bottom of the dress. We could take it into a different color. We could take it into a lighter purple or plum is really what this color is. We should be catching the bottoms of these little holes with some highlights and stuff like that. Just little things. Same with the black plates. Like, we can keep the plates mostly black, but we need a real sort of edge highlight there. Something that really picks those out. We kind of did a little bit on the rivets, it looks, which is good. We got a little messy there where we got the metal around. Like, I can see where the metal got bigger than the rivet because we pushed our brush too hard. But that being said, I need the edge of these things to also be picked out. Same with the bone. I need some deeper, darker shadows, especially down here, like way pushed under his arm and in these parts of the claws. These parts are very much in shadow, and yet they look basically the same white as any other part of it. And then finally, I think the thing that where I appreciate what you were going for, and you went for it, you swung for the fences, and there is nothing wrong with that. But where I think we've got some opportunity, we tried to justify this weird position this cat's in with this brick wall, which blocks a lot of the sort of miniature off if you look at this from the front on. So it's always strange. I feel like there's too much wall here. Now, that being said, I could put up with it. I wouldn't hate it that much. I'm not even sure I would have, sort of deducted any points for it if it wasn't this material. I'm not sure what you used for this wall, but I don't know what this is, and you shouldn't ever use it again. This looks like sponge, like sea sponge. So unless Neferata is like exploring Ariel's kingdom, I'm not sure we want to use this. Like, I can't think of a rock that at scale would look like this. These pits would be like the size of your fist if this was brought to scale. I know this because I can see the spirit host right next to it and how big they are compared to his arm. So I'm not, that was very strange to me because it just made the piece look weird. The other thing is the OSL. You're going for an OSL here. Dig it. Good try. My issue is it's way too thick. This is the ghost. He's creating the light. Reflected light is never as bright as its source. And we could mention the shadow comment I made earlier here too. But in general, what we would want here is a much lighter touch of it diffused out around here. As it is, these guys look like they're leaving streaks of ectoplasm, which maybe that's what you were going for. I don't know, but it doesn't look like he's actually touched this. It looks like he wiped his hand on it and left ghost residue. And I don't get that's the sense that that's what you were aiming at. So in general, I would love, I want to see a little lighter touch with that. I would also point out that if we're going to do the OSL, it's got to be on everything, including this grass down here where we have nothing, or this bone where it should be lighting up from here. Yeah. So kind of everywhere. If you're going to start, you got to take it all the way. All right. Overall, very cool stuff. Okay, let's talk about Victor Case's Changeling. So the Changeling, wonderful mini, lots of opportunities here to do some amazing stuff. And, you know, Victor's a great painter. Honestly, Victor, though, I feel like I've seen, and please don't think I'm being hard on Victor here, but I feel like I've seen better stuff out of him recently than this. I'm not sure if we just didn't bring all the way of the A game here or not. You have some really bright colors. And I like your color placement. Everything's in wonderful balance. As usual, Victor has a great eye for how colors balance out. We can see that the ghostly green and stuff is nicely balanced. The yellow looks is put in the right places with the gold, and the blue has a wonderful circle around it. So that all is good. And the wonderful desaturated purple he chose for the flesh tone, I think, is a marvelous choice because it doesn't detract from the other bright colors around it. More seats as part of it. My problem is some of these transitions are really stark on these large flats. When I look here, like this sky blue to other blue transition, like I can see hard lines here. Same with up here, same with the edge, same with the skin. Now, you know, blending isn't everything. Okay. You know, but in this case, it feels like these should have been smoother, and yet they weren't. As usual, Victor's gem work is pretty great. Here's a minor nit I want to point out, but it's something that, you know, if you are entering in a competition, you will get busted for. If we look right here, that is where wash of what he was putting here sprayed up onto the ghost energy. Got to clean that up. You know, like a judge will notice that and will ding you for that. So you want to watch for stuff like that. You know, you gotta keep the paint job clean. And it can be tough when you're working with washes. I know Victor likes to often paint with the models. You know, he attaches them to the base and then paints them. That's something I can't do for just this reason. To me, you always want to keep them separate, but to everybody, to each their own. So overall, I think the other thing I would say is the text on the cloth. I'm not sure about the bright blue we've picked there. I feel like that should probably be darker with maybe, if you want to keep that bright blue, keep it the center. Like if you really wanted to get crazy with this, what I would have done is write this in dark blue text and then used white to trace the middle slightly, and then gone in and used the brighter blue over the white to sort of force a blend there. I feel like that would have sold what you're looking for more, because I get the feeling what you want is like a sort of magical blue energy script. The problem is it just, when you put something bright paint like that over white, it never looks quite right. I think we also need to sharpen it up just a little bit. There's not enough spacing in between it to look like text. At this point, it does just kind of run together. We need more spaces in between the letters. Okay. Overall, cool stuff. Obviously, you know, Victor always does really great things, and this is another good one. Okay, where are we at? All right, there we go. All right, Tom Philbrick with the big old chibi demon. Okay, so this is a really fun piece. It's got some really great character to it. I mean, obviously, this little smiling guy with his 3 eyes, he's absolutely hilarious. What we need here is contrast and texture. So when we look at this, it's going to be, you know, some of the same things I've said already. The red of his skin has some nice shadows, but it doesn't have anything in the way of highlights. That is to say, at least not enough. I don't feel like the tops of his muscles, like this is cast directly in light. And yet, this is about as bright as this, as this, as this, as this. And I feel like that wouldn't be the case. Look at how in shadow this part of his arm is, or down here is, right? It's blocked by the throne, by his body, his bulk. And yet, I feel like we really needed to push the contrast there. The bone is another great example of where we needed some more, you know, sort of visual interest. It tends to be just kind of bone with some recesses picked out. Chibi is a great chance to push colorful, cartoonish contrast and colors, but we've got to have something there, you know. You can do a lot of different styles in chibi and it looks right, but we still need to heed, you know, the light of the strong. Often it actually means more stylistic shadows in chibi because we're painting it like a cartoon, which often has extremely heavy shadows and reflections and stuff like that. The gems as well look quite flat. I would have loved to see some darker color up top here, making it look more like a natural gem transition. I do want to close out on two small things I really loved about this, which is one, the NMM light placement is actually quite strong. I love it. You've got your counter reflections, your reflections. It looks rather nice. Those need to be sharpened and go to a little higher white, but like light placement wise, you really, really nailed it. Like the light catches here and here and this, like it's great. Like notice that he did sort of opposite sides. Like here, it's the light is on this side of this plate, whereas here it's on this side, but that actually makes sense given the angle of the leg. So, you know, light catch wise here on the steel, I thought was pretty darn great. And I really loved that as well. Let's look at the texture on this pillow. He put this, like, you know, sort of texturing into the pillow manually. I would have loved to see that same thing in the stone, in the bone, you know, like not the same crosshatch pattern, but that kind of texturing through stippling or something like that. I think really could have went a long way. Okay. All right. Overall, very cool stuff. Okay. Who's next? The Miniatures Paintbrush. All right. The Miniatures Paintbrush has a great channel. He's been making a lot of videos lately. Check him out. It's definitely worth a sub. And here we have a fun piece in this big giant mortise engine. He picked a big one for competition. So this will be a nice picture to talk about what I want to talk about. Overall, it's nice. My issue with it is it's flat. We did a lot of this with an airbrush, I can tell, and then we didn't go farther enough. Like we have this nice purple to black blend with an airbrush. That's great, but I need more. The bone, rather flat. The steel, look at these keys. Way too just straight metal and nothing else. I need shadows in between the key rings. I need one of these sides to be cast in darkness and one to be a light catch and so on and so forth, right? The bone itself, the same thing. I don't have near enough deep recessed shadows or changes like that. I very much like the, there we go. I love the transition up into blackness. I actually think this is a great idea because you got a ghost circling, and so it helps to make them stand out. Once again, we didn't need this red here or here or here. This is an extra color we don't need. You use it a few times. It's too desaturated to be a pop color, and you already have two exceedingly bright colors in the purple and the green. So we didn't need the red. It's just an extra color I feel like we're doing because we have an airbrush and we can get it in there smoothly. It's not actually adding anything compositionally. Finally, on the base, we have a lot of flatness on the base, and that's the problem. Like there's a picture in here where we actually get a nice zoom in on the base. There is the mud, the stone, the tombstone here. All of this is it's just way too flat. I need more in here, more contrast. And this can be done through washes, dry brushes, anything you like. There's lots of simple techniques we could do, but I needed this base taken up to actually like get more of that color in there. I noticed the OSL up here. That's fine. If we want to capture that OSL, then we need shadows here, right? Like this should be just cast in a heavy shadow here, you know, that kind of thing on this side of the ridge where the light from the model isn't showing. Okay. So the point being is that when you push the tonal, using that airbrush and such, you push some good basic tonal variation, but we needed to take it the rest of the way with the actual brush and smooth some of these elements out. Okay. All right. Okay. There we go. All right, let's take a look at idiotproofdalek's War Chanter. I'm going to go ahead and scan to the end picture here, as he has a wonderful series of progressions. This is a pretty darn great piece. The highlighting is quite clean. It's in, you know, a slightly different style, which is fine, where we have more strong lines and sort of edge highlights around all the muscles. It's a very particular painting style, and I think it's well executed here. Overall, I think where we have the significant opportunities are in a couple places. So first things first, the face could have used a little more pink. You caught the lip, but then there's nothing around the eyes, the nose, etc. Right? I think a little more variation in the skin tone under the arm, under here, under the chin, adding in some purple, something like that would push the contrast higher, which is what this is. You're painting in an extremely high contrast style. You could have used that to create more shadows to push that. And it would have also, especially if we had like some purple, it would have also then brought some of this purple tone up into the model as opposed to just down here by his feet. The bones on his chest and on his back are like super glossy, and I don't know why. Nothing else on this model is glossy, but the bones are glossy. I'm not sure why that is. But I know that I don't love it. Because those bones, everything else this model is hyper matte, and yet we have these like super shiny bones. Whenever we're mixing gloss and normal, we have to ask ourselves, why are we doing it? One of the notes on this little blue bag. So I understand what you were doing. You were trying to color balance the two eyes and create the triangle. Totally fair. The problem is that this is so bright and so saturated, it just can't help but draw the eye. Like, my eye is prevented from moving around this wonderful orc because I can't stop staring at this bright blue bag. If it was me, what we would have done, like, I think the better way to draw some blue around would have been to put some blue runes into these rocks in a circle around him. So the eyes, by following it, naturally roll in a circle. Could have also done some blue tattoos across his skin. That would have been another way to go, like kind of a Savage Orc type of tattooing pattern in that blue. That would have been another way to really kick it up a notch. And sort of bring that blue tone throughout it. In the end, the bag being blue is just, it's there to balance it, but it doesn't make any logical sense. And that's what hurts me. The stone is also just gray and white. You know my feelings on stone. I need more variation in here. It shouldn't be this clean. There's dirt around it. That means dirt blew up in here. It rained sometime. And, you know, unless he just manually made this pile of his well-cleaned stones so he could stand on them, they should have dirt on them. And reds and browns and greens and everything else. Okay. So overall, very cool model. Wonderful, well done job. We just clearly had some opportunities there. Okay. All right, David Robertson with his big ogre brawler. This guy is really nice. Obviously, he is great as far as the sort of tone of the piece goes. Very comical, him picking up the table. It's a very good looking miniature. What I particularly like is all the various colors we've put into the skin tone. Definitely, we understood that contrast was the king on skin tone, and we have a wonderful set of contrasting skin tones there. And that looks really nice. The fur has a similar level of contrast in it, which I quite like. Where we fall down is in the jacket, the pants, and the wood, in that they don't have the same level of contrast. The pants should be maybe some scuffs, should have, like, this guy's clearly a rough and tumble dude. So like an almost more denim pattern, hashes in there, scratches in there, little inconsistencies, tears, texture stippling, any of those sorts of things could have been ways to make it more interesting, in addition to just normal old highlight and low lights from blending. Same with the jacket. When I looked at it, and I spent a lot of time staring at this, it looks like we tried to work a little variation into it. This, what I think is like an alligator skin jacket or something. But the problem is that there's not enough. It's kind of like we have this sort of evergreen color and a lighter green, dry gray green, but it's just not enough. Like, the bottom here is no brighter than the side here, even though this part is directly in shadow from the fur overhanging it. And then finally, the wood. Apparently there's like the challenge is there's got to be some variation in wood. This is floor, and as you show with this wonderful bottle spilling out, which I love and is awesome, things get spilled on this floor. Unless this is the first time anybody spilled anything ever, why are there not other stains, blood, moss that's gotten in here and grown in here? Bars don't always keep their floors, especially bars that an ogre would frequent and start a bar fight by throwing a table in. Probably don't keep their floors completely spick and span. So I'd love to see some moss, some green tones in here, some like a nice stain over in the side of some blood, that not fresh blood, like the old remnants of a blood stain, right, where it just couldn't get scrubbed out completely. Same with the table. I would have liked to see it be a slightly different color of wood. When I see wood floors and wood tables together, they don't generally have the same, they're not exactly the same color. If only, if for nothing else, that the floor gets walked on, gets spilled on, gets stuff like that. It has more traffic. It has more people wearing away at it, changing its tone and texture. Whereas the table has food set on it, and so again should have stains and cuts and hacks out of it where people have stuck knives in and gotten in fights and things like that. But at the same time, it's also not walked on, trod over regularly. So the table should, again, have some different colored variation throughout it. And that lack of tonal variation, I think, is what hurt the piece the most. It still did, obviously, quite well, but because it is a wonderfully communicative piece and you did a good job with the skin, I just would like to see it carry out through the rest. Okay. All right, let's move on. All right, Dakota Weaver with the big old Orc Megaboss. Okay, so let's see. I'm trying to think of, this is probably a good picture to start on. Overall, this is a good-looking Megaboss. It's very interesting in that you have a wonderfully unique pattern on the sort of charred armor. And I like the variation you've worked into the skin. You have some extremely high highlights. The variation into the armor, you go all the way to black, almost like a completely charred thing. And here you go. This would be a nice picture to show what I'm going to talk about. And yet you still have some bright oranges coming through. Okay. And all that looks good. Now, where we have some big opportunities here is in a couple places. On a smaller level, the black on the knees just doesn't work. So let's talk about how colors act. Dark colors recess from the eye. Bright colors come toward the eye. They advance. So the problem is here you have a contrast between the knee, which is the farthest pointing part of the leg, and the ridge, the forward ridge, which is, which is popping out at you in the color black, which is recessing. And it makes his legs look strange, like they feel uncomfortable because our eye is being presented with two different realities at once. This is both the thing closest to us, most exposed to light in its area, and simultaneously the most recessed by color. I think what would have done well here is a nice edge highlight to catch the ridge, and to maybe just around the edge here of a slight ridge or slight edge highlight, pushing back to darkness here and here, because I feel like what you're trying to accomplish is char in the middle of the plates where it's the oldest and the coolest, and the edges of the plates are hot. And so you thought, well, here's the edge of the knee plate, so hence it needs to be sort of dark because it's toward the center, but I would have went the opposite direction. I would have had it be a hot sort of edge. A minor note, but something that bothered me. Blending wise, we need to smooth out some stuff there. The face, some of those highlights are a little rough. I can see paint transitions between them pretty clearly. The big bone needs, I think that's where we probably have a lot of opportunity for work. If you Google the mega bosses that, that other people have done, a lot of this piece gets done in a lot of competitions. You'll notice people tend to do heavy transitions on the bone up toward the top. The reason for that is because otherwise this is just too much white. If you didn't want to push that transition, I would still need heavier shadows being in the places where they should be. Like what feels like here is we washed it with sepia and then kind of layered around it, but it still leaves that staining effect in a lot of places we don't want it. Okay. Like we need to control the light better here in having some deeper shadows here and in here that are more natural and organic as they go out to the off-white, to the yellow-white, and then up to the very pure. Again, swinging for the fences, wonderful. There you go. That'll be a good image for it. It's a wonderful idea. I get what you're doing, but it's not that. Way too bright, way too bright, way too inconsistent with the rest of the piece. If it's meant to be on fire, like what it looks like right now is he painted his axe, like he dipped it in orange paint and then drew those flames on there by hand. So if that's what you're going for, that's fine, I suppose. But that's not, I suspect, what I think you're going for. If you're trying to make the plate actually look like it's on fire, like his axe is fiery, like when he hits you, it burns you as well as chopping your head off, which is nice, I guess, because it'll cauterize the wounds. Then the problem is we need contrast. It has to go from very dark, like you did on the armor, up to very white hot, like you are on the edge of the axe. Finally, little final note is the tufts here. Again, just the tuft thing I mentioned earlier. They look like stuck-on tufts and nothing else. I need more variation in the mud, in the dirt, and in those tufts to make them feel like they're more a part of the world that they're inhabiting here. Okay. All right. I really need a second person to do these reviews with so I don't have to talk for an hour and a half straight. Okay, let's look at Chris Smith. Chris, the big old Glocken. Boy, oh boy, did he pick a big one. Let's all take a moment to look at this massive diorama that Chris built in here. This is unbelievably massive. So, and there's so much beautiful stuff going on here. Chris did a lot of work. The bridge, the little nurgling laughing on it, the river that is being polluted, that if you look on the left is a clean and nice and fresh river, whereas on the right where Glocken is, it's turned into this weird alien purple and green affair, which is pretty wonderful. Okay. The issue that we have here is in a couple places. There were a couple things, Chris, that where you sort of, it didn't consistently live up to it. So the first is on these guys. This guy is Ephraim, I think is this one's name. I don't remember their names, but Glocken brother the first here is a little too flat. You chose a skin color that was almost the same as his robe color, and although you have the nice poppy pustules that look really good, he himself doesn't look like anything. It's hard for me to visually identify what's going on with him. He doesn't show a lot of skin, but because it's so close in color to the cloak, it's honestly hard to even know what he is from a distance. When we look at the other brother, it's Otto, maybe. I don't know. I'm just guessing what these dudes' names are. I can't really remember. It's kind of the same story with his skin. Like on Glocken himself, you have some really great variation in the skin in various tones and pinks and purples and greens and yellows and horrible, disgusting nastiness worked in there. But on him, we kind of don't have that as much. Some of the edge highlighting on the armor plates could also be cleaned up a little bit. They need to be a little sharper in some points and or consistent. So like here, if we look at this light green, it goes to here, stops, but it doesn't go up and over the edge. So is it truly an edge highlight, or are we trying? What are we trying to capture here? Just little things like that, little smooth out of the transition between here and here, where I can still see the line very clearly. And then finally, the rust on his sickle could probably have a little more variation of color, maybe some oranges, some reds to match it back down into the skin. Where when you have the pustules and the innards, those all look very nice. I quite like those. You've got a wonderful variation of tone in this rotten flesh. In that you can see it goes from sort of deep reds up to pinks and regular flesh tones. Those look great. I like that. Same with the bone himself. The piece of this that really moved me and I thought was just fantastic is Glocken himself, the big brother. He looks really wonderful. There's places where we need to smooth out some of these transitions, especially like here in these shadows, here, stuff like that. But that being said, on the whole, you really placed the colors well. His horns look fantastic. The bones have wonderful variation, like fantastic striation and tonal variation. The purple is mixed in well. The red sorry flesh with the yellow pustules looks fantastic. All of that looks good. Glocken himself was clearly the standout of all of this. You have a choice on here of this purple tentacle over here on the side. I hate this thing. I don't know what this is. But my problem with it is that it looks very, and there's a couple of them and another one right there. But it looks very flat. Like it's just kind of purple, and it's clearly going to be poisoning this water and turning it toxic is I guess the idea. But the issue is that it itself just looks like a purple piece of Play-Doh kind of rolled up and sat on the base. So that's what I would say to that. Overall, beautiful scene and really, really great work. You just a heck of an accomplishment for something this massive for a competition. I mean, this is crazy, crazy big. Very well done. Okay, now you'll have to excuse me. I need to take like a 1 or 2 minute break to take a drink and stop talking and blow my nose and things like this, and then we're going to get back to it. So we're going to have a little like 1 or 2 minute intermission here while I put myself on mute so I can come back to talking to finish this out. Okay, so back in just a quick moment. All right, and we're back. So, okay, we're good. So, drink taken and nose blown, ready to continue on. So, next up, we've got Jarax with his troll shaman. I need to bring back up my comment sheet on the other screen here. I was trying to catch up on the comments and look at some of the discussion in my minute or two break there. All right, so Jarax. Okay, so we've got this troll priest or shaman. Okay, so let's talk about what I like. We've got a nice green tone for the skin. We've got this wonderful sort of muckiness on him. We did a great job of weathering. I want to spin around to one of the back views here because I actually quite love this. This guy has never cleaned this robe in his life, and I like that a lot. It's communicated very well because it's not just evenly messy everywhere. It's particularly messy at the bottom where he's walked through muck and mire over and over again, and it's soaked up into the cloth, which is great. And you can see it's very dark here where multiple times it's drugged through mud and muck, and it gets lighter and lighter as it's wicked up into the cloth. And then you can see it's brighter up here. Now, where we had some opportunities here are in a couple places. We also have some very nice contrast on the bone. This element on the horn here on top of the staff is very nice, and the gray and the wood is very nice. Where you got some opportunities here is to bring this white up a little higher. It's still a white robe, and so some parts of it should read a little brighter, not pure white, but something nearer, especially on the top ridges on the edges here, something like that. Also the deepest shadows in between things like the fingers. The troll's hands are very flat all throughout. I don't have any deep shadows in between the fingers. The knuckles aren't accentuated, those sorts of things. The biggest, I think, challenge of this model that I have is the base. The base has all this nice sort of accoutrement on it, but it's not painted to the same level as the rest of the model. And of course, that is the name of the game. Every part of the model gets judged. It's not like the model itself. As I mentioned in the comments, when we talked about the competition, you get judged on whatever you present to me. If you put it on a very small base, then I'm not going to judge you for not having more base, but I am going to judge you on whatever's on that base. And here we have this big open space, and it's quite open. That's just it. And what we get is a lot of just gray. The stones have no cracks, no edges, no ridges, no bright highlights or lowlights, scratches, no footy prints, no red tones, anything else worked into it. So it ends up reading very flat. Same with the detail on the items on the base. They're just not taken up to the same level as the troll itself. I think ultimately that's what holds you back. It's a nice model. You've got some great ideas in it. The blue eyes look especially striking, and that's great. I mentioned earlier about drawing attention to the face. Making the skull eyes that bright blue does that. That was an excellent choice. And you've got some wonderful distressed leather scattered throughout that I quite like. What we needed was probably to carry more interesting visual elements out to the various parts of the skin that aren't mucked up, hands and stuff like that. And then some more visual interest down on the base, as well as just some extra highlighting. Okay. Next up, Jarrod Brantley with his company master of the Dark Angels. Okay. So, it's a nice figure. I like the face of the Marine. It looks very interesting. He looks very angry. He communicated that very well. It's a funny head because his little hair flaps are hilarious to me. He looks like it's a very funny sculpt. Nothing either positive or negative about that. It was humorous to me. Overall, the green color is good. Very different color choice for Dark Angels. I don't normally see them done in the yellow-green, but I have no issue with that. I'm not going to judge you on accuracy to a color palette. I could care less about any of that crap. And I think you applied it well, and you've got some nice highlights in there. Where we've got some opportunities for improvement are in a few places. So first off, let's talk about the sword and what's going on here. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you have a big power sword, as I think the company master would have, it needs to be incredibly visually interesting, show a lot of high contrast, things like that to make it look like a power sword. It's not, sadly. In the same way, the white elements are just white. I can barely tell that this is a wing because the ridges aren't demarcated in any way. Nothing has created shadow or caught highlight. The freehand on the cloak, let's spin around so we can see that, is a nice touch. You saw this model and you saw that there was all this big open space and that it needed something to break it up, and that's good. Good catch there. The problem is our freehand is a little too messy. It looks more like cracked earth than it looks like actual freehand. What we needed to do is control our glazes a little more on that, keep our highlights where it should be. So theoretically, this up here should be quite pure white, and this down here in the ridges should be quite deep red and barely visible, or crimson, as it were. Plum, whatever this is. Looks like a crimson plum. And in the same way, we need to get this paint flowing better. We need to thin this paint out, have a stronger coverage, and really get control of it, because I can see where the brush has skip started many times, where it's gotten out of control, where you've had to push too hard. That tells me the paint is too thick. Okay. Flow improver is your friend there. Finally, the bricks on the base. I see this a lot where, again, it looks just like we used the red Juila bricks or whatever they're called, and we just kind of took them out of the package and slapped them on there and called it a day. But unfortunately, bricks are actually wonderfully multi-hued. That's one of the reasons bricks look so nice on the side of a house or a building or something, because they have wonderful tones of deep browns, of chestnuts, of light browns and sand and ivory and everything else mixed in there. Capturing that at that scale is going to be tough, but nonetheless, I would have liked to see some dry brushing, some ivory on the edges, something. And, you know, probably some washes to pick out the texture. Just those are just simple touches. Could have gone a long way. Overall, very cool. I like him. He looks good. Okay. All right. Now we come to our best narrative winner, which is Bethany Graham with The Pumpkin King. So obviously, as I said, like as a piece, this is just beyond creative as he sits in his pumpkin patch, judging everyone with his little flat, dead pumpkin wizard heads behind him and his angry tree. Obviously, narratively, you know, this did win out, and for obvious reasons. If we look at this piece, it's so dense with all these different things going on, and it just communicates a wonderful story of what's happening here. Where we had some opportunities, I think, is with the actual painting of the thing. Presentation-wise, creativity-wise, it's off the charts. Painting-wise, we've still got some opportunities. When we look at the wood of the arm here, it's quite flat and samey. Like the arms don't have the same variation that the center of the bark here has. Okay. I don't mind the OSL glow, though I would have loved to see some deeper shadows here and here on the side, as well as a little bit more intense glow sort of in the center of the line. You got it a little bit. I think it really needed to be pushed a little farther to communicate it's glowing this much. Same with the pumpkins in the back. Some of these flat pumpkins are quite flat. These look like old, flat, rotten pumpkins, which I'm good with. But that to me feels like they should have darker tones mixed into them. Like these recesses should have more deep browns and brown blacks in them if they truly are that old and rotten. Same with the purples. The purples up here on the top are also kind of flat. They lack some of the pop that I'd really like to see on them. Because these are really high up, really exposed. One would expect a high amount of contrast, especially on such a dark color. So overall, I think those are the opportunities that you've got. This is a fantastic piece. I absolutely loved it, adored it. It was so evocative. And sorry, but this guy will forever in my mind be Jack the Pumpkin King. I know you don't like the song. I am very sorry, but it's in my head every time I look at the piece, and that's not a bad thing. Don't fight it. Just let it happen. Okay. All right. Next up, we had Zac Vineyard's Skull Crusher. I have a classic love of juggernauts and crushers, and this is a very nicely done piece. So where we have our main opportunities here are in a lot of things I've already talked about, mainly in things like tonal variation across the red. What this really needs is shadows in between the plates, edge highlights, just more control of the light, right? We have a nice base coated piece, but we don't really have any contrast. And this guy is a great opportunity for contrast. I've painted quite a share of juggernauts in my day, and I think that having them, more where we can see the shadow ridges here, the bottom of this leg. There's lots of places where we can work in shadows, deep browns, purples, whole reds, stuff like that to create the pop. Same with the metal. We want to take control of that light. We want to put in some chestnuts or something like that to get the shadows of this copper or bronze or whatever it is toned down around the rivets. I've mentioned rivet highlighting a lot. I'll keep mentioning it. Don't not paint your rivets, folks. Get something around those rivets, even if it's minor, and then highlight those rivets. They stand out. And if they don't, they just look weird. It looks like a wall where somebody painted over the fixtures without taking them off. And I don't think that's what's generally going on. I don't think this guy went out and got a fresh coat of paint where somebody pulled him up and just hit him with a roller. So overall, I think that's your main opportunities. The tuft thing is true again here. But I do like that we've put some extra texture onto the cork. It does a nice job of messing it up. We've got some good grit on it. So full marks there. We could have gone a little farther, a little different size grit, and torn that up a little more. But on the whole, it is better than just flat cork. Okay, well done, Zach. Okay. Next up, Spartan D, a newer member of the community, a newer painter. And he did this Tomb King Chariot. Gray looking piece, use of the liquid gold, as he mentioned in the comments. It's very nice. The things I like are the transitions on the blues. Those look very good. We can see the recessed shadowed color here, the brighter part out here. Same with up on the top of the flags. Same with the piece here in the middle. Where I think we have some opportunity still is grabbing control of the light with our gold color here. We've got some nice highlights. I can see where we put in the silvers to control our light catches, which is good. I would have liked to see some darker shadows in there as well. Up under here, kind of in the ridge here, under the wheel, these undersides that are heavily cast in shadow, I would have liked seen forced down a little more. The same is true for the skeletal horsies, which look very nice and clean, perhaps a little too nice and clean. You don't need to dirty up Tomb King's horses. They can look super clean and fun. But I'd still love to see a little bit of more deeper shadows pushed into brown or black or gray or something down here underneath in the lower parts of the ribs and the under parts of the legs where they're cut, that sort of thing. Same with the strange purple whip and halberd haft. We didn't need this purple. This is an extraneous color. This was like maybe the rest of your army uses this more heavily and you wanted to work it in here. If that's the case, that's fine. I would have also liked to see it then up on one of these little tabardy thingies here and, somewhere else we could place it around. There's not a lot of movement you have with this kind of model, but somewhere. Or if we're going to keep the purple, it at least needed more contrast. I needed to get out to lighter colors here and here on the sort of catches toward the light and deeper shadows underneath. Overall, this is a super clean, crisp, nice looking paint job. This is very well executed, Spartan, and you've got some wonderful points of contrast and highlight. I think you need to take it farther and push it so that all of the elements are reflecting light as we would want them to. But overall, great work, especially for an early painter just starting out on your hobby journey. We're glad to have you along. Okay. All right, next row. All right, so we start with Zab Asylum's Slaughter Priest. Obviously a great model. Very fun little base here with the lava sort of reaching up underneath the hand in the lava. That's super cool. I dug that. Our biggest problem here, Zab, honestly, is with the cleanliness of the paint job. It feels like, I'm not sure what we did, whether we just didn't get good base coats down over pure black primer, or what happened, but the model it's very messy. And I think my main challenge for you would be on cleanliness. I can see like these dark spots here. I don't know if that's wash applied after or just paint being inconsistent. And I have the feeling from the look of it, it's paint being inconsistent when I look at places like this and like in here where we didn't completely cover the primer color. We could handle that a lot by doing some zenithal highlighting beforehand, so we're not painting over straight black. But if we're going to paint over straight black, then we have to get a solid base coat down, multiple thin coats to get it on there and get it looking nice and clean. And then we can go back and add our volumes. The problem is that as it stands right now, it gets the effect that things start blending into each other and get a little messy. At the same side, and yeah, when we look at the guy here, yeah, I don't know. It's a mystery to me because I think that's just the plastic or whether we painted him gray. But either way, we needed to smooth out these areas of sort of blackness where it looks like black paint is showing through. If that's meant to be shadows, they're a little too strong. The next part I'll talk about is the non-metallic metal. Good attempt. I know this was one of the goals. The name of the game with non-metallic metal is contrast, contrast, contrast. Have I said that word enough yet in this review? And the problem here is we don't have enough of the transition between dark and light that makes it really look like it's popping. You've got some good angles built in, and I think that looks nice. But we needed to go up to all the way to white, same as we did with the axe. The axe looks better and more believable than the gold because, unfortunately, we don't get all the way up into the highest highlight with the gold where it would be reflecting and catching the light. It's true on the ridges on the knee. It's true on the over here. Oh, is that black a tattoo on his hand? It might be. Either way, the black in here on the chest and torso and arms are what I'm talking about mainly. Sorry, I was looking at that as I'm talking here. What we needed is some white light catches on like the spikes, the ridge edge, each outline of this, that sort of thing. I would highly encourage you to check out Figure Mentors. Just did an article in the last couple of days about somebody gave their step-by-step process for doing non-metallic gold using an interesting range of colors and showing exactly how they build it. An article I would highly recommend to everybody because it has pictures and good explanations of color theory around it. Okay. All right. SkeletonFlower. Yeah. Winner of the best painted. This was our first place in best painted. I mean, I don't know what to say about this piece other than it's stunning. It is a gorgeous piece that communicates more emotion than I could have imagined in such a tiny amount of space. You get the distinct sense that this wonderful old ancient crone vampire has a true love for her weird, grotesque undead zombie creations. And the painting, the color placement just brings it to life in such an amazing way. Using the bright colors of the dress, balancing them with the gold and the same time, then seating her bright purple face, her bright white purple skin, amidst the black gray is a genius move because it makes sure that the face remains the pop location of the entire miniature. Overall, this is, the stone with the dirt where she's pulling him out. Let's all take a moment to appreciate the addition of this little tiny spirit skull thing that came out of like, what did this come out of? The Mortis engine, I think. Yeah. This is such a wonderful, clever addition. Like, if you would have tasked me to make this piece, if you would have given me the suggestion, which nobody did for Skeleton, he thought that he dreamed this up all on his own. But if somebody would have said to me, make a piece with this vampire lady helping one of her zombie creations out of the ground, I might have come up with her and the zombie and the tombstone. Those all feel like sensible components. But I wouldn't have put this spirit thing in here. And you might look at it and go, well, what is it? What's it doing? What it's doing is adding to the ambiance of the piece and, most importantly, balancing it. It keeps more weight over here because he's naturally got only half a figure on the right side. This adds extra weight to that side. It also balances the color because it brings the red and the bright pinkish colors over here onto this side of the base because she's very weighted toward the left. Now, the bright color is still weighted toward her, but this serves as a balancing point. So she's not alone in the color and the base isn't completely bisected. It's a wonderful piece. Now, where could we up our game just a little? I did have some feedback. No paint job is ever perfect. First off, on the sort of bone of her corset, I felt like these edge highlights here could have been pushed a little farther, especially given the sort of, the nature of the striation painting you're doing, where everything goes to near white. I suspect you didn't want to do it because you didn't want them to read as gold, like as in her goblet does. But I still feel like it would have been a better choice. We could have taken it to like a warm white or something like that, maybe along just a tip or a touch. My other note is on the tufts. Unfortunately, this is the part that lets us down, and it stands out like a sore thumb. Your style, Skeleton, is so high contrast. Everything in your world is just unbelievably high contrast, right? Every stone, every piece of smoke, her skin, her dress. It's a wonderful, unique style that is, I would call the SkeletonFlower style. But the problem is then we get to the tufts of grass, and because we've used them straight out of the package, they don't have the same touch of love. The stone they're next to, the dirt they're next to, the zombie they're next to, the dress they're next to does. But here they sit flat, brown-green, doing nothing. And what I feel like we could have done here is worked some extremely deep brown-red chestnut shadows into the lower parts and gotten the tips to be more of like a pale sand or fleshy color on the tips of the grass, just to create those through a dry brush, to create those strands in ultra high contrast. And that would have brought, same by the way with the vines over around the tombstone. I feel that would have then taken it all the way up. Okay. Overall, though, wonderful piece and a completely deserved win. Okay. All right. Jack Williams, Gutrot Spume. Okay, Jack. So, very cool piece. A lot of interesting things going on here. Big old banner being held by the Nurgling and Gutrot. So a couple things to note here. First off, our edge highlighting is a little messy. We needed to get that much sharper, much cleaner. I like the overall color choice. The purple skin, the dark green armor, that works really well. Balances nicely with the, with the rest of the miniature. The placement of the banner and stuff like that, the rust of the axe actually looks wonderful. And the blood spray looks really nice and fresh. I actually quite liked all of that. I thought that looked very cool. And obviously really going for it with the freehand as we see the Kraken tentacles about to pull down clearly an innocent ship. Now, where we have some opportunities here are largely in a couple places. First off, I already the aforementioned edge highlighting, but also the corrosion on the copper. It's very localized, and the way it's happening, it feels like there should be more to it. It feels as though it's in a few places where it makes sense, but then it's in others where it seems like it should be as well, and it's missing. These three brass pieces up front don't seem to have much in the way of it at all, whereas here it's kind of in every recess, and then it's bleeding down onto the armor. Now, I have no doubt that oxidation would flow somewhat off of the copper and might stain a little bit of this, but it wouldn't be staining the enameled armor non-copper plate that can't oxidize in the same way with the same intensity as the copper itself. It would look like runoff streaks, sort of like a dirty streak. The other note I'll give is on the banner itself. Obviously, we could make the freehand a little more detailed, clean it up, some darker edges, things like that. I don't have a huge problem with all that. My issue is more with the blue water. And I know that's going to sound weird, but we didn't need the color blue on here. What we have in this piece is bright green being counterbalanced by hints of red in the blood and the tentacles and the red sun and the red Nurgling and in a couple other little small touches. And I don't mind that at all. I quite like it. The issue that I have is that then all of a sudden we throw blue into the mix and we make it quite central to the actual piece. Like on this angle, when I'm looking at it like this blue is just dominating to my vision and prevents my eye from moving anywhere else. Now, that water didn't need to be blue. I know that's a funny thing to say. It's the ocean. What other color would it be? Well, many other colors. Personally, a turquoise-ish green, because green is already in your color palette, and you could have gone to that. And people will still read a very turquoise or very green color, and it still could have been very set off against the green sky or whatever that's meant to be. by being either a slightly lighter shade or something like that. People will generally get what's going on. By doing that, you would have stayed harmonized with your color palette. At the same time, those tentacles, I like what you're going for, but again, way too bright, way too samey. The tentacles are very similarly colored throughout the whole thing. What we need is more contrast on those tentacles to show them coming up out of the muck and the slime. It looks like we ran a little bit of the slime up, which is good, but then they themselves are just so nuclear bright, I can't even see gut rot anymore. It's been overwhelmed by the brightness of the tentacles. If you scan back from this piece and you just look at it from a distance, what you see is not gut rot, but the tentacles that are on the base, because they are so neon. And that's a challenge. Overall, very cool piece. I like him. Very dynamic base for all of that. Okay. All right, Lee Ascroft and the Beastmaster on Griffin. All right, where's a good picture where we can get it what we want? Let's do this one. Okay, so very fun base. Cool colorations with sort of bald eagle colors. I like the socket you've made. The extra Griffhounds running around the edge really sell the idea that this guy is the Lord of Beasts. If we could have 2 ferrets worked onto the base somewhere, I'd really be, you know, all for it. Where we've got some opportunities beyond photography, which I still, Lee, we've got to work on your photography at some point in time. This ultra hot yellow light on the side. We've got to get you a photo booth. Your minis are too nice to not have a good photo booth to take pictures of them in. But where we have some good opportunities beyond that is in 2 large things I want to talk about. Okay. The model itself is somewhat flat, especially in the brown areas. You worked in some elements up here on the edge of the feathers, and then you saw these little feathers, and you were like, nah. Like, I can almost hear it in your head in the past. You were doing all these little etches, and it was taking a long time, and you got to these top feathers, and you were like, I can't do it. I can't go in and get every single line and draw a vein down the center and every little hook in here. And I know that because I've thought the same thing. And you got to silence that voice and power through it for competition pieces. You got to tell that voice to shut up and get back in its place, because it makes the wings look very flat. Same thing, we need the dark colors worked under the ridges. I need a shadow line here to make it look like the feathers are overlaying and overlapping each other. The same with the white, and in between here, you have some really nice variation and in the striations of the feathers, but we do need a little more underneath each feather and where they're overlaying each other. Same with up here on the ridge, maybe some darker blues or blue grays worked under each individual feather. Same is also true on the brass, the gold, whatever you want to call it. Probably gold. The coloration here, again, it's being very struck by this warm yellow light, but that's just it. It needs more control through our shading, especially on a massive plate like that, where we want to have both our light catches and our shadows. Okay. All right. Okay, Eli and the Hellbrute. Let's find a good picture here. That'll work. Here we go. All right, Hellbrute, very fun little model. Very nice, clean paint job. You look at the reds, the golds, doesn't, everything is where it should be in its placement. What I'm going to say here is largely the same I've said on a couple of different pieces like this. Contrast, contrast, contrast. It's the name of the game. The piece itself is a little too flat. The gold doesn't have any variation in it, especially around places where we could have shadows here, down here, and these ridges. We don't have the light catches. Same with the red. Very flat overall in what we could be accomplishing here. The horns and the tentacles suffer from much the same thing. The eyeballs, the places that kind of really let me down were things like the eyeballs. The eyeballs in this are such a wonderful opportunity to play around with eyes. And the fact that we just kind of went for like a light blue with a black line down the center is fine, but it's boring. And what I mean by that is we could have really kicked it up a notch. We could have experimented with some different kinds of Tzeentch eyes or something like that, or whatever. This probably isn't a Tzeentch given its color scheme, but different kinds of eyeballs that we could have put in there. You know, there's lots of different tricks as far as upper shadow, lower shadow to create the roundedness of the eyeball, pupils, light catches. There's all sorts of things. There's a ton of tutorials on how to paint eyes. I would recommend you watch some of them, especially for large scale, and bring those techniques into life here. The gun barrels are just flat silver. Would we missed a great opportunity to have some weathering, some burn, some scorch on the end of it, that kind of thing. And then finally, the base. I appreciate the nice big base, but it looks extremely flat. The skulls are basically just white. The base is basically just dark gray. I need a lot more variation, more color. He looks completely separate from it. No oxide, no red colors worked into the base. And that's really what I would want to see, obviously. Okay. Overall, very cool Hellbrute. Very clean paint job. You've clearly got the brush control down. We just need to take it up to the next level. Okay, the Swooz with the Orc Ganger. That's a very fun model. You know, there's a new series coming out. I'm dating this, but who cares? Of course it's dated. There's a new series coming out. I just saw the trailer for it called Bright, where it has like orcs and elves and stuff. It's like Shadowrun in the future in LA, and it stars Will Smith. So I'm excited for Shadowrun to finally be getting a weird movie in 2017. We had to deal with Johnny Mnemonic up until this point. All right. So once again here, as with everything else, or as with many, I shouldn't say everything else, but as with many other times that I've said, you know, contrast is what we're lacking. The pants are very navy. The jacket is very red. The hair is very tan, and that's kind of it. What we've got here is a model with some nice base coats, and we don't have the contrast we need. We're also lacking a base. You know, we have the black base. Like, I needed more, man. We gotta, you know, like I need something. The paint is cleanly applied, which I like. Like you got everything in the right places. It's applied nicely. The problem is we don't have anything really visually interesting. The green is very flat. The red is very flat. The white is very flat. Everything's very flat. And of course, what we would like to see is a little more variation in that. Yeah, I mean, overall, what I'd say is much of what I said before applies here as well. Okay. Okay. All righty. Next up, Johannes and Krell. So, this is a deceptively detailed model, as he went for a very dirty Krell, and it disguises a lot of the good work. But Johannes did a really great job here. Let's zoom in so we can really take a look. First, let's look at the patina and the various elements he's worked into the old copper to make it ancient. Okay. Now let's look at the freehand and the lighting on the axe and up on the axe head. Now let's take a look at my favorite element of this piece, which is this cloak. So he put this very complicated freehand pattern in the cloak and then basically weathered it out of existence, which always takes a lot of guts. To make it look like that one time, this was a very fine, nice cloak that has just been beaten by the ravages of time. All of these elements I absolutely loved. The green glowing eyes balance out well. But there's such a bunch of wonderful little touches to make this guy look ancient. Okay. So where are our opportunities here? Well, part of it is we're going for a very dirty weathered paint style, which is fine. But it's lacking some cleanliness in the paint. What I mean by that isn't I want you to undo your dirtiness. I mean, we need to make sure that we have sharp division still between the various colors. The helmet looks very not separated from the skull. We need more dark lines bracing the various components of this, especially when we get dirty and we have very same colors throughout because everything's kind of aged. We want to make sure we keep our detail distinct through nice lines that separate everything. Some light touches of some extra light catches or highlights around the edge, and then dark shadows in the middles of the recesses between can help to make this very dirty paint job still pop. You see this especially around the fingers grasping the axe. I suspect what you are going for is that he's pushing energy into the axe, or it's, you know, it's reacting to his touch. That's fine, but I still need something dark around the fingers to show where they've where finger ends and axe light begins. Something that segments them. The fur and hide on the cloak let me down compared to the rest of the model. The cloak itself here is gorgeous with this freehandy weathered out, but then we've got this fur and it's just like fur. It's just dry brushed fur. Same with the mohawk, same with the hair up here. There's just nothing going on with them. They look like they were colored, dry brushed, washed. We called it a day, made in one of those orders. And that's really a shame because I would have loved to see more chances to play with those and do something really interesting with them. Finally, the rock, a big unpainted rock. I don't like it. Unpainted things always stand out on miniatures, and this is just a big unpainted rock he's standing on. Nothing visually interesting about it. It just is there and it exists. It's not adding a lot to it. It's well, I guess it's adding about 3/4 of an inch to his height. But it's not adding to the overall composition of the piece in any way. He's not doing anything with it. He's not interacting with it. It's just there. At the very least, if we were going to paint it, we'd want to have, you know, we'd want to paint it. We want to make it look like it's acrylic and matched with the rest of the model, but also that maybe we did something visually interesting with it, had runes on it or something walking out from him, or scorch around his, where his feet are literally turning the earth black and cracking things. Like, there's 20 different ways you could go. I'm not saying any of them are right. The point is just to do something to make it more visually interesting. Okay. All right. Omri with his frigate. Again, very nice color scheme. I think Omri's frigate is an interesting example of contrast to the one we saw earlier, because it does suffer from some of the problems that I had mentioned, and some that it does not. Your endrins and your sort of energy bubbles look very cool. I love this use of the plasma fluid, etc. You've got some rivets picked out down here, which is good, but then we have others that aren't, that have just been painted over and have no distinction. The sides of these, the frames that hold up the endrins, look very flat because they are just sort of white. And I need more shadow here on the side of this thing, other than what the natural light is creating here under the endrin on the inside, the upper areas. The white is really, I think, the part that this is let down by the most, because it does feel very, very flat. Those rivets being not picked out at all, not having anywhere to go. I would also point out that some amount of streaking or grime or weathering or scratches or something would largely be very helpful here. I'm not asking you to turn this into an Orky vehicle and screw it up. You don't have to do that. But this is a vehicle. It doesn't heal. It gets in fights. It sails around. Even a very determined dwarf crew would not be able to fix every single streak and rust, grime, and thing every single second of every day. I wash my car. I take it out into the rain. It has dust and streaks and grime on it. And that's my car. I'm not sailing through the mortal realms or a war zone. The metal of the brass is also, I think, the other thing where we have an opportunity. As I've said many times, metal needs to be reinforced. We don't have enough deep shadows, enough light highlights. Scratches, things like that, weathering damage could also be of great interest here, although, again, not necessary. All of that stuff would help to reinforce the piece and take it up to the next level. Overall, it's great. Your paint job is clean. Your color scheme is bold. It's a striking model. And I get what you were going for with the base. I didn't mind that the base was very simple. It was well executed enough for what it was. The stamp is fine. It just is. It's sailing over this metal sort of girding platform as it's, going to be fixed or whatever. So I had no issue with that. The issue is more up here. All right. Let's look at Kieran. Forge of Wonders. So this piece is off balance, but that's purposely because there's a second model that's going to stand here as the cake topper for a wedding. Very cool. Overall, what we've got here is a nice piece. This is Jessica Thunderhawk, a 75 millimeter miniature from scale 75. Originally what they were named for, scale 75, obviously. And there's a lot of nice touches here. The extra detail put into the wings looks good. As always, Kieran proves himself a master of distressed leather. He's really good at working with browns, as we can see the various tones pushed throughout here. Where I think we have some opportunities are when we look up here at things like the glasses and at like her face. It's nice, but we need more. When you're working in this scale, you've got to spend a lot of time building up volumes. And what we needed was more natural pallor in the face. We're now operating at a scale where I should be able to see red tones, pink tones. I'm not saying she's wearing makeup. I'm saying human faces have a lot of blood very near the surface. And so she should have red tones, purple tones, crimson, things like that. In her cheeks, where they're flush, under her eyes, in the interior of the bridge of her nose, that kind of stuff. The highlights should be sharper, the edge of her nose, her chin, etc., where she's where it's cast in very sort of light because it's being hit directly from above. The same way the glass on the goggles I felt wasn't as sharp as it could have been. The highlight line there is a little stark, especially at the scale. Same on the little bird. And the dark line isn't quite present enough. I need a little more of a deeper shadow to really sell that darkness of the glass. Overall, the scratches on the feathers are good. I would have liked to see them taken a little bit farther. The other thing I want to point out that I think is done extremely well is the texturing and highlighting on the pants here. If we look at this, the weathering on this, to me, the combination of sort of weathering and highlighting is darn near perfect. They read as black pants, but they have this wonderful scuff between where they're catching light and where they're being forced thin by her knee that's pushing through it, and their own natural wear and tear. So overall, this is really, really a great piece. It's very well done, but when it doesn't mean we don't always have some opportunities. Okay. Time to butcher a name again. Tomasz, however you want to say it. Probably they want to say it the right way, but I don't know what the right way is. So here we go. Okay. We've talked about non-metallic metal, where the name of the game is contrast, and here what we're missing is not the lights, but the darks. We need this to go into deeper blue-black in a lot of places to reinforce those shadows and really make it pop, especially if we look under the, edge of the shield here, bottoms of the pauldrons, back here in the recesses and the creases in between the armor plates, etc. The flaming sword looks very nice, as does the like script and stuff like that. The part that is the most out of place here, sadly, unfortunately, is the base. The base really does detract from this piece. It's overpowering. I've made checkerboard bases before. They are very annoying to do because they have to be perfect. And what I mean by that is, you see this ridge line here where it's not exactly correct, like it goes whoop and kind of bends out. I saw that the second I looked at this piece. And the reason I could do that is because our eyes as human beings are trained to spot flaws in patterns. We're very good at that. So when you're doing a complicated pattern piece like this that has an extremely geometric design to it, it has to be flawless, or the flaws all jump out. That's why organic, or sort of random patterns are harder to spot the flaws in. Also, the other problem with it is the pink. The pink itself, I think we were going for red, and we painted the white first and then tried to do a pink marble or red marble, but it didn't quite go over enough. The issue there is that pink has no analog on the model and is way too bright. Way too bright. It just draws my eye right to the base and I can't look away. In the end, the facial work is great. Very nice skin tones. The blonde hair looks realistic. I'm sold on that. And the armor has a wonderful smoothness to it. It really is good stuff. It just lacks those darks to really create the pop. Even a soft blue steel would still have some very dark points on it. It doesn't need to be everywhere, but just some places to create that contrast. Okay. All right. Next up, we've got Bart K and the Bloodsecrator, our People's Choice winner. Obviously, this is a great piece. Overall, it's very striking. Let me talk about where I think we have what's good is more or less everything. I don't want to go in detail. What's everybody chose, you know, like not everybody, but this was the winner by voting. So I mean, I feel like people understand what's good about it because it struck them. It has a very grokkable color scheme. It's bright and eye-catching. So let's talk about where we've got some opportunities, and we're going to get into nitty-gritty of OSL. Okay, so what we've got here is a sort of sky, earth, non-metallic metal of reflections. And I quite love the axe. The lower reflections, the changes here, the move up to the blue sky. This is all really good, okay? Where we have some opportunities, though, however, is with this yellow. This fire is orange, and it's casting an orange light. Now, the axe is assumingly almost perfectly polished steel, and so is reflected. It's hanging out over the edge here. So maybe it's picking up a near more pure, perfect yellow light. But these plates and this highlights inside here would not be this color yellow. They're picking up the ambient light, right? Like all this in here. This is ambient light. He's on a rock. He's not like, he's not getting hit directly by bright yellow light. He's getting hit by indirect and slightly direct orange light where it's traveled a distance, gotten weaker. So what we would want to see here is like there's sort of a problem where our light is getting more intense as it's traveling far away. The yellow here, okay, being very weak, where what I would like to see is this being more toward the orange spectrum because it's the weaker orange light. As it gets up here. Same with this highlighting here. At the same time, if we're placing OSL here, then what we're saying is that this is the light. And our light catches in other places don't necessarily reflect that. If this is the light, then this is the shadow. Okay. It needs to oppose it. It's overwhelming whatever other natural light it had, at least down here. So the problem is that we have some light catches without the corresponding of OSL, without the corresponding light catches matching up with our blue reflective light from the sky, or the sort of cold blue night sky. We also don't have the shadows mapped exactly correctly for where that light is primarily coming from. Now, the other problem I have is the Stormcast shield. I'm sure that most people love it because it is really well done and striking. My problem with it is it's compositionally not adding anything to this piece. It's super bright. It's super blue. It's super in the middle of the frame, and it's super distracting from the Bloodsecrator himself. To the point where I can't really even look at the Bloodsecrator because when I let my eyes relax, all they can see is that overwhelming blue shield. I feel like what we needed to do there was scratch that thing way up, desaturate it, bring it into a darker blue so that it wasn't so bright, because it does end up overwhelming the piece some. Overall, this is a great piece. The skin tone blends are wonderful. The non-metallic steel has some great light points and understanding of the way light manipulates, especially that axe, which is standalone. Just fantastic, full stop. Okay. Okay, so femto with the Auric boss, mega boss here. So a couple of thoughts on this guy. What I've said a couple times remains true here on the tonal variation and the contrast. The black against the red looks very nice. I think your color choices are good. But I think that what we want and what we need here is some more variation on the pieces, whether through edge highlighting, through scratches and battle damage, through various ways we could achieve it. It just feels like it needs a little more to really pop. Simultaneously, we've got a few too many colors on this page, or sorry, on this model. Namely, the green pants probably don't need to exist. If I had to pick a thing, those should just be brown. We've already got ruddy red skin, and I know we've got the green for contrast, but either we kill the green pants or we put a lot more green around this model. One of the other things that jumps right out at me is the base is rather flat. I needed a little more life and energy and color in there. Even on the dust plains of Mars or whatever, there's going to be some amount of oranges and yellows and whites and deep browns where in those cracks, and I don't see that here. When I look at the back of the model, it looks like we've got some inconsistencies and some unevenness in the paint. When I look at the little straps, they need to be more clearly defined. When I look at the highlighting on the back of the pants, it looks like it could be a little more clear. And then finally on the bone, it looks like I can still see some of the black primer through where we didn't get a good solid coat of white. And of course, with the bone, it's not as, we would want more contrast on that, where it comes down and has some kind of transition or transitions out to darkness. I would accept either one, but it needs a little something. Overall, very nice. The blood streaking back from the axe is cool. I would love to see a couple more splatter pattern on there as well. But overall, it's a very nice Mega Boss. Okay, Andrew has this big giant base here. The heck of a base. Boy, oh boy, he's really even testing me on how crazy a base can get for a single model. And we might have gone too far here. I don't know. Like, we might be overwhelming the model itself with this massive base. A couple things about it. I like the galaxy pattern very much. The color choices on the Eldar skimmer here are nice. Or Dark Eldar, whatever it is. On this elf spaceship are very nice. Where we're lacking is in some variation on the actual model. It's clearly been painted in this galaxy pattern. I don't think it's actually made of stars. I mean, other than the fact that we're all made of stars, it's not made of stars. And so we need more variation around the machine itself. The edges of the, let's get to one of our zoomed in shots. Here we go. The edges of the bike, or whatever this thing is, you know, here and here on the edge of the plates need picked out. We need deeper, darker recesses in the middle there. Probably some light tonal shifts toward the front or on the uppermost ridge. Same with the Eldar here, where we don't have as dark of, you know, we want some more recesses and color into the elf's skin to more make him pop and have the contrast we would want. Same again with the gold, where it's rather flat. And we're just sort of relying on the metallic pigment's natural ability to reflect. But of course, as I've said before, we need to take control of that light. Now, to address the elephant in the room, which is the base, I do love a big base. This one is as crazy as it gets. But if he's meant to be like flying over this thing, if this is a real thing in the world, and he's like flying through it like some weird game of Quidditch, then we've got to do a little more with it. You've got some nice weathering, some nice spongy stippling of weathering on there, which is cool, but we need more. If this thing is really this big and it sits outside, which is what seems to be implied by the weathering, then I need grimy streaks and scratches and damage and cuts and all sorts of other things, as well as more highlighting and variation in it. I'd want to see more color shift as we get down into here, more shadow up into here. Down here, like this on the under part is cast in very deep shadows. So I would want to see more around that. Okay. All right, William Matthews, Arball the Undefeated. Very cool mini, classic mini. Basically, where I think we have some opportunities here is sort of with the general cleanliness of the painting. I mean, I'm fine with things looking dirty, but we have paint out of place. We have some coffee stains from washes around some of the model. The transition of the bone is nice, but the metal, especially the axe, is fairly flat. We don't have shadows and light catches. On the flesh hound itself, the color of the scales, the sort of yellow ochre, really doesn't work with the rest of the scheme. It's kind of the only place that color exists, and it's distracting. Basically, it halts the movement of the eye. The challenge here is that we aren't drawn to Arball at all, unfortunately. We have this wonderful banner, which full marks for. It's super cool. I like the old ragged cloth banner. I have no problem with that. And then we have this bright puppers sitting underneath him in red and this bright yellow scales. And Arball just kind of gets lost. He just, he is defeated by color composition, unfortunately. So there you go. Overall, the basing is very cool. I like the skulls everywhere and stuff like that. Super corn, super chaos. I don't mind that at all. I just feel like what we needed was to sort of clean it up and have a little sharper cuts and transitions and control of light, especially on things like the metallics and even the reds. Okay, Radek with his Terminator here. All right. So it's a very cool marine and a very cool scene. I want to spin around so you can really see the base and all the stuff going on in there. Yeah, isn't that cool? I guess neat. I love the old like barrel or whatever that is down in the water, the mud. I like this. So, okay, where we have some opportunities here are the white of the actual marine is quite flat. I feel like we need more variation on the armor, especially in the deep recesses. A few highlights or edge highlights could also probably go a long way. Around the face would really go a long way in making the marine pop. As it is right now, his face is rather bland compared to the rest of the model, especially since we got other bright colors there against the white. The other problem we have is we've got a little bit of Skittle syndrome here because we've got red and green primarily hitting off each other, which thumbs up. I like that. But then we have the blue power sword because I guess power swords are blue. And then we have the purple little tassels all over the place here. And then on the front, a tiny amount. My problem is we don't need all of those colors. The sword could just as easily be green or red. I don't think power swords are necessarily written into stone. They have to be blue. But even if you wanted to use the blue, the real offender is the purple. Power swords often look out of place on their model. They're often extremely, eye-catching because people do them in blue and don't have them balanced on the model. I suppose that's fine. But that purple really doesn't need to exist at all. That could just as easily be green or red or some other neutral color. The basing work is absolutely stunning on this. It's great. My only one possible composition pushback is this branch is very much in front of his face. And in general, you want to avoid sticking like actual elements of your scenery in front of your model, blocking vision to the model. This is a big thing that the Golden Demon judges usually bang on about. Like if you have something covering the feet of the model, they often deduct for that and get very upset about that because the model is the central figure and you should, in general, but in most cases, be able to see all of the model. So like just rotating this branch around to a different angle might have been a good choice there. I really like that like Spanish moss or whatever it is hanging down too. That looks really cool. Okay. Kieran with the Onager Dune Crawler. Okay, so some of the things I've said previously about this apply here. We've got some nice hits on the weathering. We got some nice rivets picked out. The weathering might be a little strong. The streaking and griming should probably be feathered out more, but there we are. I love, love, love all the dust and dirt and Mars grime worked up into the under casing, under chassis, whatever you want to say. And on the feet, it looks like this, like here. This is wonderful. Down in here, this thing has been walking across the Martian landscape. Totally buy it. One of my problems is that the dust ends here. Like this is the line, and then there is no more dust. Mars has like sandstorms all the time, and this red dust as this big machine is walking should be kicking up everywhere. Like this thing has 4 legs with which to kick up dust. And so we would have bits of the dust scattered around. Up here, it would collect in recesses, like on the tops of these vision, like little boxes or whatever, you know, in between stairs, around rivets up top in these cracks. They would all get coated in this red dust eventually, and there'd be little places it hides, and it's very hard to get out. The other thing I would say is the steel itself. Down here, it looks wonderfully varied because of the oranges and the red of the steel. Or sorry, of the dust, but up here it's very flat. Again, this is the same height as this on the model, and yet this looks like it was drugged across the landscape for weeks. This looks like it just freshly got a new arm installed. And even then, we're still missing the normal contrast. My final note on this, and this is an easy thing to miss, but people's brains are going to notice it when they look at it, even if they're not consciously aware of it. You put a bunch of dust and grime up onto the model, onto his feet and into the undercarriage, which, as I said, I love. However, then we put the barrel and the 2 plates onto the base. Now, what has been on this scene longer? The dune crawler or the pieces in the dirt? I'm going to argue the pieces in the dirt have been here far longer. Unless he's walking across a barrel and 2 stone slabs that just hit this space 3 minutes ago. Excuse me, 3 minutes ago. There's no dust. There's no dust or pigment up on top of this thing or blowing across this barrel, caught in the ridges, caught back here. It makes it look like they didn't actually belong here. We have disparate elements that look out of place. Dust, especially very deserty like landscapes like this Mars landscape, would just cover all this stuff so fast. It would be up and over the sides. It would be all tinting everything red. It would be stuck and burrowed into every deep recess. And that didn't happen. So there you go. Okay. All right. Vindicatus with the Killacan. All right. So I'm to avoid repeating myself here too much. Let's talk about a couple things because I've mentioned them all. This basically breaks down into 3 items: tonal variation, weathering, and patterns. Basically, this model needs more. What we have here is a very nice, very well executed, very smartly placed set of base coats with some minor touches for weathering. For example, on the bottom of his jaw, you can see some of the paint being etched away on his feet. And I like that. The problem is that this guy needs more. 1, he's an orky vehicle. 2, he has so much of the same, just flat yellow. So what I need is either tonal variation into ochre, into browns, in the shadows, deep recesses around the rivets, around the spikes, in the plate segmentations, where those are clearly defined, and edge highlights around that. Second, I need I need some weathering and damage. You've got some up around the ridges here. You've scratched off some paint down the bottom. I need more. This is an orky vehicle who's just a madman wielding guns and or mad orc, I should say, and a giant claw. This thing looks like it's never been in a scrape. And as we all know, orcs like the fighting. So a little bit more would have gone a long way there. Again, I'm not asking you to just like beat this thing to snot. Just, I don't think orcs upkeep their vehicles. So like if it got a paint scratch, I don't think he'd care. So it's probably going to stay there for a while. And then finally, patterns. Orky vehicles are often very creative and colorful. It's the advantage of the orcs. Checks, dags, all that sort of stuff would really take this up to the next level and help break up these massive flats of yellow that are kind of all over the thing. Final note on the tufts, as I mentioned before. And then, of course, what do we have here in the center? What do we have here in the center? Those look like guns to me. But yet, no drilled out gun barrels. In fact, we still have the bit of sprue lock piece on there. For shame, as we all know, and as I have said, if you fail to drill out a gun barrel, I will notice it. And that will be like, you drill out your gun barrels. There you go. It's a quick step, and it does a lot of work. All right. Zachary Britt, Belisarius Crawl. Very nice little scene here, by the way. Zach really set up a great presentation. Okay, so a lot of things I've already talked about for metallics are going to apply here, and I understand it because it's tough. We know how to shade cloth and colors and matte colors. We don't really know how to shade metallics often. But the problem is that we desperately need it, especially on a model like this. I like the basing. It looks very rocky Martian landscape. I'm not sure about not edging the base. I understand you're trying to seat the model into this diorama, but I think then still having it not be smooth and having it spill over the edge like that is just a bit strange. If you were going to go that direction where you didn't have the base black rimmed, I would rather you just cut it off. Because it's this weird sudden vertical change. Like it's a vertical piece. It clearly doesn't look like part of the landscape. And yet here it is being the same color and having a little bit of texture, but not quite as much. You know, it needs more. Okay. The coppers and the steels are what really need more life here. Around the rivets isn't picked out again. So yet again, we got our old rivet problem. But that being said, I do really love the use of the blue against the orange for all the power and energy and skin and stuff like that. Wonderful, wonderful choice. As we mentioned before already in this review, blues and oranges work fantastic together. So color choice wise, scenic wise, it's a great model. You can see here with these rivets, like this is a great shot that shows the rivets not being picked out. And it looks very strange. Because it should have something around it. It's just exposed metal. Yet there's no visual distinction. Okay. Fred Mulvaney. All right. So this one's going to be somewhat easy. And that, remember everything I just said about the Kill-A-Can? That again. This is a very nice color scheme. It looks great. The paint is very cleanly applied. The basing here is nice. Let me say that. I like the rocks. The shrubs look very placed in. They have mud and little things built up around them. The cork has good texture. Basing is good. Muy bueno. Where I have some issues is we've got these, we have the greens and they just don't have the variation I'd like to see. Shadows up under here, bottom of the fingertips, edge highlights here, something. We could do some scratches, some damage, you know, just something to break up all this flat space. Now, full credit where credit's due. Each one of those rivets, they're nicely picked out here. We look at these wonderful silver rivets, just like very nice. That's good. I'd like a little stronger shadow around them, but that's minimal. Also, the gun barrels are drilled out, which is awesome. Very good. The gold here in the center is where I would like to see some more highlight and like a wash and highlight technique applied, if nothing else. I'd rather take some careful control of these shadows and really push some specific highlights in the silver gold. Same with the gun barrel. This is like a mini, what is that? Like a melt-a-gun or something, probably. I mean, those things get super hot in the lore. That's the whole idea. They're firing out. They're called melta-guns. So my guess is that copper or whatever it is gets super. It's probably like Dura Space Copper, whatever it's called, gets super hot and should have some color changes or something to it from having repeated super powered laser blasts shot out of it all day. Overall, really, really cool, good looking Dreadnought. I dig them. And you did a lot of great things there. Okay. All right. E-Dave with Ranger Rabbit, who, as I said, if I had the category, he would have won cutest because he's adorable. Okay, let's talk about the things I really, really love on this. Well, first of all, very unusual pick of a model, but of particular note here is the fur. It's so gorgeous. The texturing, the shadowing, the highlights around the ridge of the nose, the way that you captured it is so wonderful. It looks like a very alive bunny. His eyes are just popping with life. The little bit of pink in the end of the nose without being cartoony. The ears, all of that is wonderful. And, you know, I mentioned before about hands and stuff like that. You can see the nice highlights on the edges, the knuckles. Looks wonderful there. Okay. Where I feel we have some opportunities is to add this sort of same level of visual interest to other things. Like you've got this very detailed fur pattern, and yet things like the leather is very flat, whereas we could have some scratches, some texture in that. The cloak, let's spin around here. Oh, wrong way. Sorry. Get me to it. Is nice, though we needed a little bit of deeper shadows. I quite like most of the highlights, although there's some points here where they're not as smooth of transitions as they could otherwise be. The non-metallic looks great around here and the edge. It's wonderfully well executed. I could use a couple little small light catches, but that's a very minor note. On the whole, I'm perfectly fine with that. Oops. Sorry, hit the wrong button. On the whole, I'm fine with that. Finally, the base. I mean, look, I know this guy came on that little base, and so you just kind of put it on that, but I'm going to judge you on what you include. And what we have here is a little bit of like spongy metal from the cast that just is painted green with like a random tuft stuck on it. That underwhelmed me greatly. This model is so gorgeously beautiful and so wonderfully detailed. And then we just literally threw a layer of green paint over textured sponge and called it a day, you know, over the thing that sits in the mold. We needed more out of that. It needed to elevate to the level of the model itself. The NMM work, the fur work, the eyes, there's so many elements of this that are just gorgeous. And I wanted this to match, and it didn't. Okay. All right. Eran Roseman with his big old dragon. Take a look at this guy. Oh, yeah, this happens. I need to not click on that picture. Okay. So, with this dragon, the issue that I have is that let me get to a different picture. There we go. Perfect. This one will be the one I want to talk about. This will be perfect. Okay. This is a cool setting. Compositionally, I like it. You've placed him off to the side, so we gave him some interesting room to move there. We also gave some nice leading lines of the dragon's roar. Here's the problem. Your leading line leads to nothing because this is the leading line of the piece. Swoop. If there was another miniature here that he was roaring at, this would have rated higher. You have an angry dragon in a combat pose roaring. You created a leading line this direction. You triangle segmented it off to separate two foes, and there's no foe. And it hurt the piece. Overall, that was, I think, one of the first things that struck me. As well, we just need to do some general cleanup in our painting. When I look at things like the yellow on his belly here, you can see where it's just not as clean as it could be. The little black tips on this, still, it's very obvious we've got paint strokes. There's no blending to it. It's just the dots, the way that's applied. The actual bone ridges need a little more contrast. We need to get down into darker, move up into lighter. We could do striations. We could do smooth blends. We could do horizontals. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It just needs a little more. Same with the individual scales. We need some more darkness hidden in between those scales and a little more lightness on the edge. And usually on a big dragon like this, that means controlled, very light repeated dry brushing mixed with glazes to smooth it out. And then at the end, you got to get in there and you got to get that brush and you got to go to work on each individual scale. Doing a big dragon for competition and having him compete at a high level means you're going to have to individually take time to clean every single scale. And yeah, settle in, because that's not an easy task. But I mean, that's what it takes. Same up here. You can see some of the black still in there. I would have liked to see more variation in the wings. We've got a little bit, but I want to see a little more. Finally, on the lava field itself, it's fairly... The problem is we got this big giant base where we could set a scene, but the whole scene is fairly boring. It's just kind of some crackle paint lava that we're not really doing much with. It'd be neat if we had some other things in the lava with it beyond just like a couple flat pieces of cork. What we need are, could be anything. Could be other things sticking up out of the lava. Could be little dancing elementals. Could be big rocks. Could be things melting in there. It could be the Terminator out of Terminator 2 giving a thumbs up. I'm not really picky about what it is, as long as it's something that kind of keeps the whole thing more visually interesting and uses the space. It's cool to give your model room to move, but if you give him too much, it's enough to hang himself by. Okay. All right. Deathabilly Pete. Let's take a look at our best creation. So here we have the giant unicycle of Tzeentch. You can see how tall this thing is, standing next to Archeon. He took a Doom Wheel, he broke it up, he took the giant, he modified the giant, and he's got a Plague Priest driving the whole thing. Let's just take a moment to really take this ridiculous creation in. It's amazing the way he split the whole thing up and has it all out there, up to the guy on top. It's really, really wonderful and hilarious. Just great work. The building of the little foot pedals, like you can see it didn't have a foot pedal underneath it. Lots of little detail, lots of little elements as he strung this all together. Creation wise, it's just beyond imaginative. It's insanity, and that's why I love it. Overall, where we had some opportunities here is clearly with painting. Deathabilly won best creation, and it was certainly well deserved. This is that. I think our most of our opportunities are with the painting. The skin on the giant being fairly flat, although the stubble around his head and like if we look at, let's see here, there you go. If we look at that picture, the stubble around his head is wonderful. That's really great stuff. Where we would also want to see that, though, is that same thing as in the pants and the skin. We'd love to see some more variation there, especially around the highlights of the belly. Same when we get down into the metals. Some of the metals are nice and weathered, but they're just kind of flat. No light catches on the edge, things like that. The wood being another place of significant challenge here. Where we have some opportunities. When we look at this wood, it's just very brown. It's just sort of a brown cage, and that's it. That being said, the creation itself is worthy. I love it that it's got to be like 13, 14 inches tall. Amazing work, man, and a well-deserved win for best creation. All right, Dan Groth with the Reikio Pilot. This is a very cool model, Infinity model or whatnot. Looks nice. I like the color choices. I think they pop really well. So my feedback would be this. First, we need to sort of smooth out some of our blending. Some of it is a little harsh. I can see some paint lines in between things. Especially on like the red to yellow transitions, I can see very clear paint lines. I think that you wanted to use the highlights as sort of musculature, underneath the that's what that is showing through or something, which is fine. I have no issue with that. The problem is it still needs to end up fairly smooth or have a clean line to it. The gray-blue could use a little deeper shadows in some places. I think you wanted to keep that very bright, and I get that. To contrast that, you didn't want to run the full gamut like you did with the red to yellow, which I have no issue with. But there are some places, especially like on the interior, in between her legs, up under her face, where I feel like we need to smooth out between the darkest dark lines you've got up to still having some slightly heavier shadows. Finally, the base is somewhat boring. I mean, I know it's a sci-fi, and the rust is a nice call. That's good. You went from blue to red on the base as well, but I would have liked to see a little more there. Texture, something else on the base, a broken section of the plating, you know, whatever. Just something that makes it a little more visually interesting than she's walking across this, you know, sort of metal catwalk, and that's it. Overall, very cool piece. Okay, Jens BK. All right. So this is a very interesting little scene happening. Obviously, we've got the Lord Celestin killing the Bloodletter. So where we've got some opportunities for improvement are kind of what I would point out as follows. The black metal needs a little more variation to pop. Even dark black reacts to light, you know, especially when surrounded by shining gold. The gold itself, you know, needs more variation in the same vein, as I've touched on many times, you know, having more shadows, sort of chestnut colors, maybe even purple, and then fine points of light up on the highlight and light catches. Finally, the bone armored section of the Stormcaster more or less universally shaded in the recesses with a wash and highlighted, but we need some more variation in there that actually heaves the way the light would be interacting with the figure. More brighter whites on the higher areas and some more smoothing of the transition to brown. The Bloodletter has a really nice face. It's very bright, but unfortunately it's so bright he kind of becomes the center of the frame. He draws a little too much attention away from the Stormcast, as nothing on him is as bright as the Bloodletter. And, you know, maybe we should have taken the highlighting on the face of the Stormcast up a little more to match, so that their two faces were both points of interest. And then finally, on the basing material, of course, we have our old problem of cork. The ocean is very blue. The cork is very gray, and there's not much interest in either of them. They're both just kind of flat. I have no issue with the water effect. He's booting this dude into the ocean, but I need a little more on that stone. On the whole, very cool, and special shout out for this wonderful celestial cloak, which looks very nice and very much in flavor with the Stormcast. Okay, Southpaw Studios. Let's take a look at the Chapter Master. Trying to find what the best picture is here, where we can see it, where I can talk. There we go. Okay. All right. So, you know, overall, your color choices are solid. I like it. I like the sort of conversion. I think where we have some opportunities for improvement are in a couple places. I think we want to focus on smoothing out the paint, working in thinner, more controlled layers. Some of the transitions are, you know, quite stark, especially the highlights on the tabard and on the back. The colors themselves are also kind of flatly applied. We need to up the sort of tonal variation and contrast. Darker shadows in places like under the legs, in between the plates of armor, etc. Same with the highlights, sort of cleaner transitions and more edges picked out, or alternatively light catches. Okay. The gold also looks fairly flat. I've talked about it a few times. Obviously, some chestnuts, some purples, etc. could go a long way here. Finally, the bullet shells on the floor, or on the ground, whatever you want to say, it's not really a floor, are cool. I like the idea. The bolter shells. But the problem is, one, they're all in a very discrete, tight pile. And I have to wonder, like, how did they all get so neatly stacked? You know, that's my thought there. Whereas I would expect shells that are shooting out to be just kind of flying everywhere and bouncing off each other. Like, this shell would have hit a different shell and gone boo and shooting off in a random direction. So things like that, I think it's often little touches, but it's things that sort of breaks the immersion of the piece. Nice banner. Again, we'd want to smooth out the paint a little more, but I do very much like the banner and the way that you applied the colors there. So very cool. Okay. Andrew Fairbanks and Durthu. I like the alternate position Durthu. Okay, and I'm glad you didn't use the crappy Durthu face. This is the right face. Such a good call there. Okay, good color choices. I like the green sword. I think it balances well with his branches and stuff like that. The problem we have here is the wood is flat, as are, you know, a lot of the green tones. Tonal variation is something we need to really push with this. The wood doesn't have enough detail etched into it. These models are so incredibly detailed, and yet, you know, when I look at this, what I see is brown and just brown. I have nothing in these recesses, no glow, no runes, no incredibly dark, nothing on the edges, the ridges where it's really sort of begun to dry or fade or would be caught by a highlight or whatever. Okay. The eyes are good, but the rest of the, especially the face, suffering a lot from that flatness because I want to be looking here. You know, we could have filled these runes out with like a bright green color and then I would have been naturally drawn here or something like that, right? The sword being kind of the same thing throughout is a little strange. I know it's a big magic tree person sword, but I would still love to see some kind of variation in there to make it stand out a little more. Finally, and the part that I'm sort of that kind of lets me down the most is the basing. You know, basing, we've got some mud, we've got some grass, we called it a day. There's not much variation in anything on there. It's, you know, what I want to see here is if this guy's walking through nature, this guy's walking through nature. I want to see dead trees, flowers, different sized grasses, weeds, everything, you know. Tree men and the way that they interact with their base, it's the perfect chance for you to just go nuts and create a beautiful nature scene. So I feel like that didn't live up to what we would want out of the whole model here. All right. Dice Miniature Paint Guy. Okay, so this is a very cool piece. Let's take a moment to appreciate the OSL work that's going on here because all of this yellow and orange is actually reflected off of this fire sword from this into steel armor. Same with the side of his faceplate. I'm interested to see somebody paint up the rest of these Dark Souls miniatures. I looked over this as a friend got this game, and the miniatures did interest me. This guy is quite large, and I think that serves well. The OSL is nice. It helps to make the model much more interesting. I think part of the problem we have is that it's still a bit too yellow in some places. I would have loved to see it have a slightly more orangish hue. Especially as it needs to be more subdued than the light source itself. I have no doubt that it would be, you know, somewhat yellowish, but it's quite yellowish. And it also could use a little more smoothing into the metallic itself. That's the problem with doing, you know, sort of yellow reflections on metal, is that if you look, let's look at this piece here. Where is the light that's lighting this up? Well, it's coming from here and hitting here. So this is supposed to be the light part, right? Here's the problem. This guy's still sitting in normal light. Here's your light. It's reflected right here. Because we didn't wash the metal and get rid of its shininess, we didn't control the light. So we're letting it get away from us. This is actually the daylight, but the bulb you're shooting under has told me, nope, this is the light. It's coming from this direction down, right? And the OSL doesn't seem to want to heed that. So either we needed to take it into a more orange and mix it with the metallic to create that effect. Like, so we have it actually being, you know, yellow-orange metal or very thin candy-coated metal. but then we needed to also grab the light and shadow the rest of it. So we take the light back away from other light sources that are going to interact with our miniature in the real world. Finally, on the freehand on the cloak, I see what we're going for. It's nice. And again, way to recognize the big flat space and go, we need to do something. And I like the layered nature to it. However, we need it to be a little more clean. The brush strokes, the paint looks very dry. I can see where our brush jumped, where we didn't get it as smooth as we would want. Right in here, right in here. As per the previous thing, I would say flow improver is your friend. Get that paint thin, get something like the extra opaque, something with a high density of pigment, get some flow improver in it, and get some nice, long, confident brush strokes going to create this. I love the layering of doing some of the strokes and then glazing and glazing and then doing the strokes and glazing. That's fantastic. The way it's sort of creating this dense cloud of effect, and I really do love that. I just think we need to make sure we're staying very smooth with the way we're putting them on. Okay. All right, Burning Beard. Very colorful, bright wizard. Like, and he's relatively well color balanced, which is impressive given that this guy is a riot of colors. Where we need to work on a little bit here is we need to work on more carefully thinning our paints. The transitions, especially around the cloak, are rather stark and thick, where I can see the paint strokes, when I look like in there. We also have too much color similarity when it comes to the face, the book, and the paints. This is a good sort of thing here. You don't always need to go to a new color, but you want to be careful when you're, because of washing and because of other things, 3 things that are very different textures end up looking almost the same, namely his face, his book, and his pants, which if I look very carefully, I can see the color distinction between, but it's just I have to look very carefully. As to the base itself, I'm not sure what environment I'm supposed to be in here. Like, oh, you've got this kind of light green. Is it meant to be stone? Is it meant to be like, it almost looks like he's standing on crystal or salt or something. I don't know what it is. I feel like I need a little bit more to see me in the world of where this miniature is at. Finally, when we're doing eyes, we want to make sure we have those eyes have a nice circle around them to really make sure that they're clean and we don't get that surprised look of too much white against the black. As it is, he looks kind of surprised. But a lot of nice touches, and as I said, really good color balance. All right. Let's look at the Muffin Bagger. So this big demon lord is pretty great. I love the basing on this. I love a lot of things about this model. It's really, really wonderful. The skin variation is great. The purple to blue, the horns and bones have some really wonderful life detailed in them, and it feels like a real scene that where this guy that is occupying. Like, you look at that base, there's so many wonderful things going on there. It looks like this battlefield, this abandoned space of death. Perfect for this big demon to be sitting in. When we talk about areas of improvement for this, there are a few things that come to mind. I feel we need some deeper shadows, especially in the lower third of the model, where some of the legs would be cast in deeper shadows. The face could use a little more pop, especially around the eyebrows, nose, and upper lip, to really pop and love it. They shouldn't be uniformly visible. The real challenge for me is the wings, where as the membrane gets closer to the bones, it would naturally bunch up and obscure things like veins. Whereas in the center of the wings, they are spread, more light would come through. Whereas here, like, I like the veins. The problem is they're universally visible and seeming to be heedless of how stretched or how taut they are, the presence of the bones, recesses, things like that. Whereas I feel like what we need is here on the sides, this would be very dark, and this would be very stretched thin and light. The veins would show extremely starkly here to middle to almost not at all. Okay. And that was sort of one of the big things that jumped out at me. Let me just say overall that I don't have a lot more to say about that because it was a truly, truly wonderful piece. All right. So Greg Charlebois, the Dark Angels chaplain. Good color choices overall. The red is bright and suited to the chapter. Purple cloak does well. Neutral robe in the middle is a good choice. You could have went for another color. You didn't. Good job. Where we've got some opportunities for improvement, we've got some rough painting into places where it looks like we either dry brushed or had very dry paint. That comes up in a couple of different places around the model. It doesn't generally tend to work on very smooth things like armor. We want to stay away from that kind of dry brushing on a lot of these types of figures where we have very smooth, long, flat surfaces. I can especially see it in things like the smoke, where these transitions are just very these transitions are just very stark, and it's somewhat harsh and doesn't quite sell me that it's really smoke. At the same time, I want to see more pop in the red of the armor, around the edges especially. Finally, the big thing to me, the yellow of the tassels is so stark and doesn't have any lines segmenting it. We didn't need that bright yellow. That could have just as easily been like a neutral to a neutral brown, and it would have been much more in line with the rest of the red-purple alignment of the piece. We brought another hot color into it when we didn't need it. And ultimately, it distracts from the overall piece by placing a super bright color in the middle of the model where it doesn't belong and stops my eye from moving. Final note, eyes. Eyes are the life of a miniature, and this one has none. Eyes always need to be bright and alive, even when they're in a helmet and behind weird space goggles or whatever he has on his face. They should still be something that pops and draws your attention. Okay, I need one moment here, and then we're going to go to the next piece. Okay, let's continue. We're in the home stretch. All right, peel tag with the orc mega boss. Okay, so this guy's pretty great. I love a lot of little things in here. The battle damage on the armor, the transition on the skull makes it look wonderful, very natural. We still have some great highlights if you look around the edges here where we would see light catch around the edges of these cuts. That all looks very nice. The face has some good highlighting, things like this. The edges of the armor plates. Let's take a moment to scan back and really look at this base, because I think it looks pretty great. We've got this wonderful, gray blasted wasteland, but we've got the little dryad bits mixed in as sticks with blood on the edges. We've still got some other colors that have been pushed and washed around, buried skulls. Look at the red tones mixed into the stone. This is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Okay. As to our opportunities, I think that there's a couple places like on the inside of the mask, and this is nitpicky, but it's a thing I notice in some of the images when I look on the inside of the mask in here. You can't see it in this image, but it looks unpainted because I'm guessing this model was painted with the jawbone attached. And in these kind of cases, if we're talking about competition, we got to break it into sub-assemblies and make sure we get paint everywhere, because you never know when a judge is going to dig and look in weird places. And I didn't even have access to the model and I could spot it. I think the skin could use a little more variation. You have wonderful variation across a lot of the armor, but especially the face here. Having the nose or the eyebrow ridges at the bottom of the jaw become a little brighter, go into maybe a pink tone, a more fleshy skin tone, something like that. It could really add the central pop to the model. One of the problems is we have such bright red and the white around the edge. We almost kind of lose the orcish face when we zoom way out. Basically the T-zone lacks sort of a visual interest. You've got good highlighting. It just needs to go farther. I think the axe is probably my biggest area of disappointment overall. The axe looks so flat compared to the rest of the model. You've got wonderful variation throughout the thing, and you got some nice scratches on here. Like, it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. This you did wonderful with this. Nothing on here is bad. It's just, I feel like this should have more. Your scratches are nicely applied, but I want more. I want light. I want a bit of touch of orange, of rust, of something. You can be very minimal with it around the rivets, around where this place has been driven together, that just add a little bit of color, some touches of some brown tones, some deeper shadows and recesses in a few places. Those kind of things really bring these big, flat, empty spaces to life. Yeah, I think that's probably your area of improvement. Now, obviously, I should say both Mickey and I scored this very high on painting because I think it's extremely well painted. But I think there's still, those are your opportunities there. Okay. All right. Rob Norton. Okay. Where's my front shot? There he is. Okay. So the model has some good color choices. I like a lot of the things you've done. He's got a lot of different colors working on him. Then there are some opportunities we've got, but on the whole, he's nice. So what we need to do here is something I've said a lot. We need more tonal variation, more contrast. We've got a lot of flat colors here. The blue of the smoke, the purple of the cloak, the green of the armor, the orange red of the guts, the steel of the axe. They are all very clear. They lack shadow. They lack highlight, every one of them. The smoke has a little bit in it because it's got a wash applied, but it needs more. It's smoke. I would also say I don't think it needs to be that blue. I don't think you needed that blue at all. I think that's probably, just unnecessary in general. The metal axe being a particular place that lets me down just because, it's a big axe. It's pitted. It's got all this machinery on it. It's got all the opportunities in the world to work in lots of different shadows and things like that. And we just kind of didn't jump on any of them. Finally, the base, he's walking through this muddy landscape, which is fine, but even a muddy landscape should have some kind of variation in it. It should have some different things going on, deeper tones, colors, ivories, flesh tones, sticks, muddy grass. Again, there's 10 or 12 different things you could do. We've got to do, and you don't have to do all of them, but we need to do some of them to make it more visually interesting than just kind of wet mud. All right. Docadez and the Pox Collar. This is really a fun exploration of this new model that, we've seen a couple of these now, and I really think they are a fun new model to paint, even given my hatred of Nurgle. I think they're still, obviously a well-sculpted, well-put-together model. I think it suits your style of painting quite well. So, the oxidation on the bell is good. The tonal variation on the bone is good. The spatter on the cloth is good. The glow in the plasma is good. Where we have some opportunities here, I think, are to create some more variation and contrast, some shadows and highlights as they would fall, especially on the white of the plates, the cream of the plates, and the brass or gold or whatever it is. You've got the oxidation, but beyond that, it's very flat. We don't have our light catches. We don't have our shadows around the rivets, that kind of thing. The bright nuclear green, I think, could be cleaned up a little bit by having it in one more place. I don't know what that is exactly or how, but maybe it's inside the bell somewhere on the right side. It's maybe that Nurgling is brighter. There's probably a couple of different ways you could go. Maybe it glows from inside his helmet. The point being is we've kind of got two pieces of the triangle now, but we don't have the third. And so it stands out and becomes like the hyper brightest part of the model without anything to really balance it out. The stone on the base work, of course, as I often say, is just rather gray. we need a little more variation in there. That would be another great place to work some sickly greens and purples into to really sell that he's bringing the pox with him. All right, Jeremy Merle with the last piece. I almost, which when I first submitted everything, thankfully it was caught. I almost missed Jeremy. I'm very sorry because his piece was down here inside there, and that's okay. Jeremy was a newer member of the community, but I want to take a moment to really look at this because it is a gorgeous piece you did here. Obviously, when we look at this, the standout element is the skin tone. This is such a wonderful treatment of this darker skin tone. It's absolutely stunningly gorgeous. That's like the highlighting, the subtleness of it is wonderful, just wonderful. Now, unfortunately, the rest of the model doesn't quite meet up to that same level of sort of contrast and of pop. The purple is good. The purple and the green cloth, the problem is they lack as much depth and visual interest. And we've got a lot of large flat. If we go back here, one of the pieces that really tripped me up in the future, yes, photos in the actual post. That's okay. Like this, when I look at this, it's just flat purple. Like we have a little bit of variation, but not enough. It's just a lot of this model being spent doing nothing, just being more or less blank space because it's just purple with some slight variation. No light catches, no textures, no freehand, no nothing. That's a big canvas that we didn't do anything with. Okay. At the same time, the gold in there, a little more shadows. The leather is a little bit flat. There's not like scratches, weathering, something more variation in that as well. The biggest piece for me is the base. Again, that orange log just looks like a giant orange thing stuck in the middle. It doesn't have the striations or variation that I would normally expect out of a piece of dead wood, and this is dead wood. It's lying on the ground. It's not a living tree, so I would imagine it should have gray on it for dead wood, moss growing on it, something. Like it should look like a piece of wood that's sat on the ground, unless it just got thrown down at her feet like 2 seconds ago, and which maybe not. The tufts are also, again, just kind of like stuck on there. I noticed that you put a little bit of like flock or texture onto one of the tops of the tufts, which I like, but they're not even like very firmly seated down into the dirt, which makes them look like, if we look at this one, I can see the gap in between the tuft and the dirt. We never want to make it look like something isn't part of the world. So more dirt getting pushed up, wash is pushing it down, make sure it's nice and flatly adhered, any of those sorts of things. And it's a little thing, but it's a thing that really sort of bothered me was the base rim. It's not clean. Like when you paint a base rim, you're doing that to create the frame for the model, and it needs to look like a clean, even thing around here. You generally want to stick to black or dark gray or dark brown would have been fine. It just would have needed to be consistent. Things like that you notice because you take a nice painting, you hang it in a bad frame, it injures your overall impression of the painting. Overall, this is a great piece, and I want to give a final shout out to the hair with the wonderful light catch. I don't think the hair reads as completely black. It's probably a little too much, but that's okay. I don't mind at all. I still think it's totally worth it in the end because it looks like beautiful, reflective, shiny hair, and I just assume she's on the front of a hair dye bottle. It's wonderful. All right, and with that, we are at the end. Oh my goodness. Woo! Boy, oh boy. That is a marathon to do that straight through. There you go. Maybe I'll have to force Mickey to come join me next time just to make sure that I don't have to talk for 3.5 hours straight. But overall, I want to again thank everybody who submitted. It's absolutely wonderful. I loved reviewing all these pieces. I loved looking at everybody's work. Everybody did such great stuff. And here's what's most important. As I said, nobody should be comparing them to anybody else. This is the first step in comparing you to yourself. It's about taking your next step. So I would encourage you to take the feedback that you get integrated into the way you paint your models. Maybe not every model, but some models. And certainly for the competition when we do it again next year. Okay. So we're definitely going to do this once a year. I think this time of year is good. I think in the summer, people have more time available probably, is my thought. And so that's probably when I'll try to do it. It's certainly when I have a little more time available. But I want to once again give a big shout out to Skeleton, to Bethany Graham, to Deathabilly Pete, and to Bart K, our 4 first place winners. But I really want to shout out everybody who submitted, everybody who voted, everybody who participates, and most importantly, everybody who comments, who gives feedback, and who shares in the PMP every day. Those people who comment, who give advice, who share their knowledge, because it is that positive feedback loop that happens on a daily basis that is how we all truly improve. That's the great secret. Okay. I do the show once a month, or this contest once a year, and I hope it's helpful, but it is never as helpful as those people who are putting in the work, really looking at everybody and helping out the community. Just so to all of our community members who are sharing and giving their thoughts, I want you to know how deeply appreciative I am of how much you make this my favorite place on the internet for miniatures, of what makes us stand apart. I thank you all for doing it. I thank you all, everybody, for being great community members. As I said, if you want to join us in the PMP, the link will be down below. Thanks again to everybody who was watching. I hope everybody found it helpful. The emails will be coming. I'm going to try to get everything broken up and send it out tonight. We'll see how that works. So if a few don't show up till tomorrow, don't worry. It's been a long day. I am a bit tired at this point, but everything will be coming. Everybody will get all their feedback as well as their scores. The trophies will be coming in the mail. I will need addresses for the 4 people. I will put my email down there. I think most of you already have it, but I'll put my email in the description. Feel free to email me, the 4 of you, so that way you can receive your hardware. Congratulations again. And thank you again to Mickey for helping me judge. I think that's it, folks. There we go. So, first annual PMP competition in the bag. Thanks to everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, we'll see you next time.